All right, thank you. So here we are, people. This is Thursday, January 28th, and this is Senate Government Operations. We are here today. Our topic until I believe about 3:15 is going to be on elections. And what we have done is we've asked for people to send in their wish list of elections. And so we have gotten wish lists from the Secretary of State's office, from VPIRG, and a number of groups that got together and submitted one list. I think we got some from a couple of the parties. I can't remember offhand. Individual legislators have sent us. Our committee has generated some. And we put them all together in a list that is posted. There are a couple that are missing on there, and I take responsibility for that, because what happened is that as people sent me their lists, I would update the lists, but then I would update an old list, and so sometimes some things got forgotten. I think we now have everything either on the list or as a supplement to the list. And what we're going to do, the way I thought we would do this, because this is a huge issue, and if we're going to do anything with elections at all, it has to be done this year, because we can't monkey around with elections during an election year. So we have to have anything that we do has to be completed by crossover. And just to keep us on track, I'm aiming for a date of February 19th. I know that's a couple weeks before we have to have it done, but if we set that as a kind of a deadline for ourselves, then we'll have a little slush time in there if we need it. So that's, and the way I thought we would do this is that today we will hear from people who have lists and concerns, and just with their suggestions for us. That would be the Secretary of State, VPIRG, the parties, the League of Women Voters, the political parties, I mean. And then what we'll do is the committee will go through, when we get the final list, the committee will go through them, and then there may be some that are simply beyond our control to do anything about, that we can't do, or that we'll just cross those off, or things that maybe we've already done before them, but that people can agree on, and we'll just do that. And then we'll start dividing them up. And I kind of divided them up, and this is a little premature, but I kind of divided them up into a couple different areas, kind of the general, the huge issue of mail out, and then the general election, the primaries, the admin pieces, and then kind of miscellaneous changes. So with that, I don't want to start going, I want to start hearing from committee. Do any of you have any questions about that so far? Normally we allow only committee members to do it, but Deb, I'll make an exception this time because you don't usually come before the committee. But what was your question?
Thank you, Jeanette, for that. I'm just wondering, in order to set the table or the stage for this here, can you tell me what's driving this conversation? The need for change.
Every year, every non-election year, we look at making slight changes to the elections law. Some of them come from the Secretary of State's office for cleanup. Some of them come from the town clerks because there are things that they want to do. There are some things that we learned here, like maybe early processing, that the town clerks have asked us to look at again for permanent changes. So probably every other year, I would say we do elections cleanup.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yep. So with that, I think what we'll do is we'll start with kind of setting the stage for us from the Secretary of State's office, and then we'll move on to other people. And what I would say is that I know this is going to be really hard for everybody, but don't give a lot of arguments for your issues. Just tell us what your issues are and kind of just a very brief snapshot, because we will be looking at the issues more in depth later. Does that make sense? If we start getting into long arguments for a particular position, we won't get through this today. So that's what I would like to do if everybody is okay with that. Committee? Okay, these, I hate these Zoom meetings, and normally when we look at the committee, we're kind of around the table and I can see them, but I have to look all over my screen and I can only see 16 people. So if there are more here, I can't see them. So, all right.
We'll shout out and say, good idea.
Secretary of State, would you like to start? And I'm not sure how you've divided this up, but it's yours right now.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to try to be brief, and I'm going to try to stay at a high level, Senator White. So following discussions with interested stakeholders throughout the late fall, the last couple of months, and testimony that's already been provided to this committee, we believe there is some common ground that has been found on some of the items related to mailing ballots to voters between our office, between advocates, and between town clerks. We believe that implementation of these reforms is achievable, and we would represent a significant step forward towards the vote by mail system permanently. Additional reforms related to mailing ballots may become practical and may make sense over time, but we believe that you can't jam it all into one session, I think. And we think that what I'm going to highlight to you right now is kind of a common sense approach to ballot mailing following the 2020 election. As many have recognized, the 2020 general election was one of the safest, most secure, and most accessible elections that we've ever held here in Vermont. It also was one of the smoothest from the standpoint of operationally. Having said that, we believe that ballots mailed centrally by the Secretary of State to all active voters by a certain date with postage paid in both directions is a smart move to make. We believe that the ballots should be returned to individual clerks' offices for processing, just as we did this year. We believe that for the August primary, because that is a completely different type of election, we should continue with using a postcard request type system. And that we believe that it would be proactive to permanently offer the option to municipalities to, again, it's an option to mailing ballots out to their voters for local elections. The second item on our list is the allowance for early processing during the 30 days preceding the election. This worked extremely well. As you probably are well aware, the current law says that it's 1 day before, but we were one of the states that had 98% of our local ballot counts into the state by midnight on election night. And we're pretty proud of that. And I just came from a call with the Council of State Governments. I'm a national co-chair for the Overseas Voting Initiative. And there were election directors as well as another, my co-director, a co-chair from Washington State. And they all said the same thing, that the early processing of ballots is really important to make these elections work smoother. Returned absentee ballots can be removed, should be allowed to be removed from the certificate envelope and deposited into the tabulator or a ballot box, depending on if it's a tabulator town or a hand count town. Voters voting in the office may deposit directly into the ballot box or into a tabulator at that point. We believe that it's there is a need to determine the time frame for a clerk to open mailing envelopes and examine the certificate envelope and determine whether that ballot is defective. And I say this because in the early processing of 30 days before the election, we had some towns that used all 30 days. We had some towns that used it once a week. And some towns that didn't do it, didn't open up the early ballots until just before the election or maybe the day before the election. We think that there should be an opportunity to cure a defective ballot. We recognize that there are some issues that we have to discuss with the committee regarding the primary election, but the general election, we had a very, very low, probably one of the lowest we've ever had, of less than 0.5% that ballots were considered defective. We need to clarify the reasons that a ballot is defective, but I also want to caution that Vermont is already a state that has very few reasons for a ballot to become defective. We need to consider how voters are provided notice of their ballot status if the ballot is considered defective. We currently have our My Voter system, My Voter page on our website, which will provide whether the ballot's been received and should say whether it's defective or not. But we need to figure out how, the real problem here is that if the town clerk doesn't open those ballots until just before the election, it may not provide an opportunity for a ballot, for a voter to cure a ballot that may become defective. So we think that there needs to be, whether it's once a week or something, that they have to, the clerks have to do this to determine whether a ballot is accepted or defective. We also have to be cognizant, and I say this with all due respect to the town clerks, we have to be cognizant of the fact that we have to be careful about the administrative burdens that we provide to them. But all of these things that we've done in the past have allowed us to have a more final result, although it's still unofficial on election night. We need to expand and codify the use of secured ballot drop boxes for return, and also to consider how that will be funded. And we need to, for now, I would say, exclude a signature matching requirement, because we do not have signatures on file for any of our voters, and to start that up would be very problematic. But beyond that, there are many folks out in the political world that will tell you that signature matching is not all it's cracked up to be. I can tell you that my signature is different today than it was 10 years ago. I can tell you that my mother's signature, she's 93-year-old, is different than it was 3 years ago. So I think that signature matching is something we should be looking at, but it's really something for the future, not for right away. We also think that postmark of ballots after election day is something that it's not a solution that we need in Vermont. We have very few ballots that come back to us after the election. And if we did decide the postmark of ballots, the postmark of election day is something that we want to look at, then we have a lot of other dates that we have to move out. For instance, and I'll just give you a few, the town clerks have 48 hours to get their certification of the results that they have to our office after the election. So if we accepted postmarked ballots up to 3 days after, we'd have to change that because the Friday, they've already reported their results to us by Friday morning. So we would have to move that date. Then we have a finalization, a canvass date that is 7 days after the election. That would have to be moved out. Then we have to look at all the recount statutes as to when recounts can be set up or requested. So all these things have to be looked at, and it all has to be in conjunction, especially with a presidential election, keeping an eye on December 14th or roughly for the Electoral College. So, and in the interest of time, I'm going to go back. I'll let Chris or Will add anything that they might want to add at this point. We have looked at the list that came from your office, Senator White, and we would certainly have more comments on all the things that are listed on there. Some we would oppose, some we would support, some we don't know what it's requesting. So there's a lot there, and we would certainly defer to having further discussions with the committee about those items on that list. But I wanted to give you a synopsis of what we have had discussions with some of the advocates and the town clerks, and these are things that we think are doable for the immediate future. With that, I'll turn it back to you for Chris or Will to decide if they want to speak as well.
Thanks. And I will say that I would prefer, actually, if you don't comment on the other things that were sent in at this point, because we'll be taking them up and we'll be looking at those in a more organized manner by topic. So at this point, I don't want to say I don't care if you support them or not, but at this point, we really don't. We will later on. So Will, did you have, or Chris, did you have anything to add here?
I don't have anything further, Madam Chair. I think the Secretary hit the high points, and we're interested to hear what other folks have to say. Will might have something.
Thanks, Will.
No, I think Secretary Kondo said it well, and I know you've got a lot of people who need time today.
Yeah, so I think that that's exactly the way we're going to do it, is people will just present their ideas and then, but not necessarily comment on anybody else's ideas that are there, because that is testimony that we'll begin to take later. So with that, thank you, Secretary Kondos, and I will take this one other opportunity, we do it whenever we can, to thank the Elections Division. I know that Will is looking a lot less haggard than he did a while ago, and for running a really good election, and it went smoothly, and I think that was due to the incredible work done by the Secretary of State's Elections Division and the town clerks. So we all owe you a thank you. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator White.
So with that, do we want to go to, I think we had Paul Burns on the list, and I think you're representing a number of groups.
Yes, unless Carol Dawes is ready to, I think she was ahead of me.
Oh, I don't have a copy of the list here, but if you want to defer to Carol, that's just fine with me. Carol, do you want to go next?
Sure. Thank you, Paul, and thank
Sure.
you, Senator, for thanking us as clerks for the elections. We couldn't have done it without the collaboration with the Secretary of State's office, with the legislature, with the post office. There were a lot of parties that participated. So you have my memo. I'm not going to go through the memo in in detail. I'm also not going to repeat things that the secretary has already said. Just a couple things that I would point out that we would like to also have considered is whatever authority might be necessary for towns to hold outdoor elections. Drive-through voting, that certainly worked well for us in August and November, and so making sure that we had that option would be important. We have several times in the past talked about perhaps changing the way write-in votes are tallied, allowing an opportunity for candidates to declare their write-in candidacy either through the Secretary of State's office or directly to a clerk on election day, so that we're not having to tally ballots, votes that aren't for legitimate candidates. The other thing is we would love to see a complete review of how the August primaries are done. They are expensive, they are time consuming, they are confusing. And I think that the voters would appreciate some review of that process. But the one key that I wanted to say, what really made this past fall successful was flexibility. By not mandating and restricting options, by allowing there to be different options that communities could use, whatever was best for their particular community and their situation. And so I think making sure that we maintain that flexibility is very important. Thank you.
Thank you. It's the shortest list I think I've ever heard from the town clerks around elections.
It's 4 pages written, so.
I know. And I think most of them are on the list.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, thank you. Any questions for Carol committee? I'm looking at, okay. Paul?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Paul Burns. I'm the Executive Director of VPIRG, the Vermont Public Interest Research Group. So thanks to Carol and the rest of the clerks as well. I can't say that enough for making the 2020 election as successful as it was. Thanks to the Secretary of State and his staff and all who played a significant role in that. I submitted a couple of sets of recommendations. The first that I want to comment on was actually filed jointly, Madam Chair, as you mentioned, and VPIRG submitted it, but on behalf of our organization, and I'll just list the other 9 or 10, AARP Vermont, ACLU of Vermont, Conservation Law Foundation, Disability Rights Vermont, the League of Women Voters of Vermont, Rights and Democracy, Vermont Conservation Voters, Vermont NEA, and Main Street Alliance of Vermont as well got on after I submitted that. So let me run through what these recommendations are briefly. These all have to do with the idea of making universally mailed ballots a permanent feature of our general elections moving forward. So 5 items that we think are most important or really significant priorities on this particular issue. The first is ballots automatically mailed to every active registered voter, just as we saw was done in November. Number 2 is multiple return options, the drop boxes, polling places, election offices, etc. Number 3 is the importance of preserving prepaid return postage envelopes, as was done. The pre-canvassing the Secretary of State, Condos spoke about earlier, very, very important. And indeed, I guess I would add that as a part of that, we may want to look more at some requirement about when ballots come in, that they must be pre-canvassed, or that some action must be taken in part to potentially determine whether there are errors or problems with those ballots that could potentially be cured. So, and that gets to the 5th item, which is to add, this is the only one that would really be added to the process that was in place for the November elections, some sort of a curing process, so that voters who do the right thing, submit their ballots, intending them for them to be counted, obviously, but perhaps a number of them have an error that could easily be fixed or cured, like failing to sign that inner envelope, to give them every opportunity to correct that error so that their ballot could be counted. Many states are doing that now. There are different ways of getting there. I know you don't want to get into the specifics of that now, but adding a curing process is important. And again, how you go about that may necessitate some change to the pre-canvassing piece as well. So those are the pieces that we think are most important for 2021 consideration, so that we can be squared away for the 2022 election season. But additional items that we wanted to note was the question of whether we can count ballots that are postmarked by Election Day and received sometime after Election Day. We support looking closely at what we could do on that. Secretary of State said that there are very few of these ballots that come in after Election Day. I think that's true, and I expect that that will continue to be the case as long as we have robust public education programs to try to encourage people to send those ballots in on time and well before the election. And my organization and many others who endorse these proposals played a part in helping to educate folks. But there still are some that come in after. And in fact, we don't know exactly how many because there is no record kept, no requirement of the clerks currently that they keep a record of how many ballots come in after. So it's an area that we think is worthy of consideration moving forward. There's another item where some states have moved to eliminate the requirement of the inner certificate envelope requirement, I guess I should say. There's more information and recommendations that we made on that, but I think that's one more way that we could avoid any unintended disenfranchisement of voters. An important one that could and should, I think, be addressed this year is to provide greater access for people with disabilities who may receive their ballots currently electronically, but we could perhaps do more to allow them and could do more to allow them to fill out those ballots and return them electronically. And I will just say, I'm not the expert on this, but Secretary of State's office has expressed great willingness to work with our colleagues and allies on this, particularly at Disability Rights Vermont. And so I expect that we will find common ground on a reasonable path forward here, but it's worth noting, I think, as well. And then last would kind of references the point that I was just making about collecting more data, like how many ballots come in after Election Day is something that we may want to look at. And we would add that it might make sense as part of this legislation to invite or require some sort of a report or analysis after the 2022 election, so that, as Secretary Kondo said, that maybe we get into some of these issues after 2022, but something that would help to tee up what those next steps might be. We still recognize that 2021 you have limited bandwidth to do some of these things. Most important is to make it permanent and ideally add a curing mechanism, but we can do some of these other things perhaps later out, and some sort of review or consideration of that we think might make sense. And all of our organizations recognize that the Secretary of State has made a reasonable argument for additional resources. His election staff is small, incredibly competent, and incredibly hardworking, and there should be more of them. And I just think that he's made a very, very strong case, and all of us agree with that as well. That may be somewhat beyond the purview of this committee, but worth noting. And then, so that's it for the universally mailed ballot recommendations. I will just name quickly just a couple of other priorities that are VPIRG recommendations specifically. One is ranked choice voting. I'll note that ranked choice voting is going to be on the ballot in Burlington on town meeting day. If that is approved by voters there, we will urge you and your colleagues to support that change to their charter. And then ultimately, we're looking at a potential change in the way that we elect our federal office holders here for US Senate and Congress and president even, where some states like Maine, for instance, have used ranked choice voting in those elections. 4 or 5 other states used it in presidential primaries in 2020. So that doesn't necessarily have to be a 21 issue, but worth noting here. And then finally, in the way that we run our state races, we have supported for the last couple of sessions a ban on corporate contributions to candidates. This committee has passed that 3 times. The Senate has passed it 3 times. We hope the 4th time is a charm, and that this year we can get the House to take it up. The House Government Operations Committee did pass it last year, but it never made it to the floor after COVID struck. So banning corporate contributions, and we think the flip side, and by the way, that was S47 last year, and S32 was a bill to simply study ways to better, to make our public financing system work better. Looking, for instance, at democracy dollars is one example that has worked well in Seattle. And we have a system that just isn't being utilized, isn't working right now. And if we ban corporate contributions, the flip side of that coin might be, how can we make public financing work better? And so that was an additional recommendation. We might say, why not pair those 2 concepts into one bill? Those were our recommendations. We certainly would be interested in weighing in on other items as you take them up. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks. Any questions for Senator Rahm?
Yeah, thank you, Paul, for all of that. I'm doing a lot of soul searching about how to make public finance of campaigns better. I don't feel like the conversation has evolved too much past vouchers for people to support local candidates in more municipal races. Have you seen any best practices around changing and simplifying public financing of campaigns in other states?
If I can interrupt there, I don't think we want to get into the details of any of the issues right now.
Okay.
I mean, we will take, that is definitely on our list, and we've passed it before, and it will remain on the list. And so unless you have a burning
Maybe you could
desire.
just send that.
I would be happy to follow up, Senator Rahm.
Well,
Yes.
we will take it up also. So
Yeah.
when we get into the details of this, but I don't really want us to get into the details right now until we've heard from all the people who have wish lists.
Mhm.
So I see AAR. Thank you, Paul.
Thank
I
you.
see AARP is here. Did you want to? Are you here for support, or did you have something to add?
Thanks, Senator. We have a few things to add. For the record, my name is Greg Marshall, and I'm State Director with AARP Vermont. I want to thank you for the opportunity to comment on this. First, like others, I want to congratulate and thank the Secretary of State, the small election staff, and all of the town clerks and election volunteers who were able to adjust quickly to the pandemic restrictions and deliver an election, in Vermont that by all standards was a great success. AARP strongly supports maintaining the election changes that were implemented for the 2020 primary and general election as a result of the pandemic. So automatically mailing ballots to all registered voters and allowing them to either vote from home or by mail, or to drop their ballot at a town clerk or place in a secure election drop box. All of these changes made voting in Vermont easier, more accessible, and increased voter turnout. Many of our members, so people 65 and over, vote more than any other age group. AARP's members in Vermont who voted from home by mail did so safely and securely, and voter turnout across the state increased as a result. The comments that we have received from our members across the state have indicated that this was not just during the pandemic, which they were grateful for, but they would love this opportunity to be able to continue to do that moving forward. The pandemic definitely has shown us that a truly inclusive democracy requires us to change our whole way of thinking about society. And to do so, we have to broaden our mindset and reevaluate who was left out and why. We have the ability to greatly expand opportunities for Vermonters to participate in government by maintaining changes, both digital and non-digital, that have been made to provide more access during the pandemic. So maintaining these options for Vermonters to vote is a top priority for AARP. Again, AARP supports the Secretary of State's request for funding and a staff position to support voting by mail. The Secretary of State needs time and resources to implement and maintain voting by mail. We support ballots being mailed automatically with prepaid postage, maintaining multiple options for more mail ballots to be returned, including drop boxes, and allowing ballots to be processed by election officials well in advance of Election Day. We believe that people with disabilities should have full and independent access to the democratic process and support efforts to assure this is true for all of our elections. And I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you. And I appreciate that everybody is supporting the Secretary of State's. First, I should say that we appreciate what VPIRG and AARP and the parties and all the other advocacy groups did around the election to help educate people. I think it was, they were an important part of the success. But in terms of the getting somebody else to help, I don't know where we would ever find somebody as devoted and well qualified. So just remember, that was supposed to be a compliment to and I did see Will grin a little bit there, but. So we have Lila, did the league have anything that they would like to add to this? You are, okay.
I'm sorry, I was not expecting to be up quite so soon. Lila Richardson, I'm testifying on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Vermont. As Paul Burns indicated, we were one of the organizations that signed on to the recommendations that he submitted to the committee. I would just like to note that when I was looking on the website prior to this meeting, I did not see those comments posted, so I'm not sure what happened there, but I think for the public it would be important. I assume the committee does have the letter that Paul was referring to. I just want to quickly say that if I have problems with my internet, it's because I have a very, very poor internet connection at my home. So I'm hoping that even with the video up, I'll be able to go through this quickly. Just a few points to emphasize from the League's point of view. The League is a nonpartisan political organization that it really promotes informed and active participation in government, and it is very heavily involved in voter education and advocacy. And I just want to stress nonpartisan because we think that all of the issues that we're suggesting that the committee take up will benefit all Vermonters, no matter what their political affiliation is. So it's important for everyone to participate, everyone to be educated to understand how the election system works. And very quickly, I would add to everyone else who has complimented the Secretary of State's office and the town clerk throughout the state. There was an extremely difficult situation that they were dealing with, a very aggressive, difficult timeline. The League worked very closely on education issues with the Secretary of State's office, and they were incredibly responsive and helpful to making sure that voters got all the education about the new system and how it was going to work. And one thing that the League worked on that hasn't been mentioned before is voter registration. We don't really see any issues that have to be changed for that, but there are a few things that everyone will have to pay attention to if we start looking at how the universal mail system works. Just to go over the points that Paul mentioned, we support the idea of all voters being sent the general election ballot. I think that for the primary, there should be discussion about how that process would work and if the postcards that were sent this past election cycle were a good idea. Saying that all voters will get the ballots is not totally realistic or true, there still has to be a sort of backup process for people who have moved, people who register after the central mailing occurs. And I think that was confusing for people in this past cycle to see how the existing early absentee voter process worked in conjunction with the mailing. So I think, it's important to take a good look at that so that new voters understand what their options are and how they can get ballots to mail in. Excuse me. We also support the multiple return options for the ballots that are sent out. We think it's extremely important to have the prepaid postage. It's also very important to have the pre-canvassing that several people have already discussed. And that ties into one of the really important issues for the league, which is the opportunity to cure the defective ballots. And I think everybody recognizes that the two have to be considered together, and that pre-canvassing is also important just in terms of making the system work for the town clerks, for everybody involved. And as Paul mentioned, access for people with disabilities is an issue that should definitely be looked at. We would also encourage the committee to talk to Disability Rights Vermont about that. I understand that there are issues around possible electronic return of ballots that are sent to the military overseas. And so that would be a part of looking at a system of how to have voting electronically. And finally, we do think that for things that the committee doesn't decide to do, the legislature doesn't decide to do this year, it would be extremely important to collect and study data to determine what is going on in Vermont now with respect to issues like the receipt of ballots after the election date, how prevalent that is and how that might be changed would be very important to us. So knowing the committee doesn't want to hear arguments on these issues, those are really our main considerations that we think that the committee should be looking at this year.
Thank you, Lila. It isn't that we don't want to hear the arguments. It's that
No.
we want to get a complete list first so that we can look at them together, and so that we're not having arguments for and against things in kind of a hodgepodge way, but that we can take them in a coordinated way. So
I appreciate that. I didn't mean to suggest you would not listen to the various arguments and to the various possible solutions as well.
We do try to listen, but some
Yes.
people think we often don't well enough. But so I see we also invited the political parties, and I see we have somebody here from the Republican Party, the Democratic Party. Is there someone here representing the Progressive Party? I don't think so, unless I don't know who. So with that, should we go to the Republican Party first? And I don't know, Deb or Pat, how you want to do it. And remember, we're giving our lists of our wish list here rather than commenting on things that are already proposed. So take it away, the two of you.
Well, if I could, Madam Chair, I'm here actually as president of Campaign for Vermont. So
Oh,
I
you
will,
are? Oh,
yes,
good.
so I will turn it over to Deb.
Because I had not heard from Campaign for Vermont, but I sent a thing out.
Yes,
Good.
and
Oh, I'm happy to.
We
Okay.
sent written comments, and I'm here just to listen and to add anything that I could.
Oh, great. That's great. So let's go to Deb, and then Bruce Olson, and then back to you, Pat, for Campaign for Vermont. Is that okay? Okay, great. Okay, Deb?
All right. Thank you, Senator White. Thank you for inviting me to this very important discussion. This is more of an educational moment for me than anything else. I did send in a list of items that the Vermont Republican Party might be interested. It did not make the window of opportunity to get added to your list today, but Gail does have a copy of this. And I believe I sent it to one of our senators as well.
And it will be added.
Okay, thank you for that. So with that being said, I'm not going to go through my list. It's 15 items or more. So, and we're already into this meeting 45 minutes. So I'm going to try to keep my time very short here. This is a very interesting conversation. I think every one of us wants to make sure that we have the maximum voter integrity that we can embed in our election process. I do believe that the November election in Vermont went off very well due to the dedication of Vermonters and all the people involved. So I think we can, that's something we can all be proud of. And I do support any modifications to the process, provided that they continue to, as I said, increase the integrity of the voting system in the state of Vermont. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I guess I apologize that I didn't get the list in time to get it on, but I will get it and I will add it to this ever-growing list. Brian, Senator Collmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Deb Billiger's list is on our website right now.
Okay, but you know, my little way of making lists and categories is a little antiquated here, but so I will definitely look at that. Thank you, Senator Collmore.
Thank you.
Bruce.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee for this opportunity to participate in initial discussions about possible election law changes. My name is Bruce Olson. I'm chair of the Vermont Democratic Party. And I first want to echo the comments of earlier speakers about the remarkable work that Secretary Condos, his staff, and the town clerks did in terms of implementing a vote by mail for the first time during a pandemic this past year. We think they did a remarkable job under very trying circumstances, and there may be some tweaks that we need to make to this system, but they did a phenomenal job, and the first time is never easy, and our hats go off to them. I'm going to be fairly brief. We've just submitted a few things that we think are important in terms of our priorities. We can go into more detail at a later time. But first and foremost is the continuation of universal vote by mail. And we add the option of making sure that Vermonters can also vote on election day in their town offices. We know that many Vermonters like that idea. They like the kind of the ritual of going to the voting booth and participating on election day. We don't want to see that end. But we support universal vote by mail primarily because it had such a significant increase in voter turnout, and that results, in our view, in a more sound democracy. So that is really the intent of having, that type of system. We did it because there was a pandemic this year, but I know where I live, when I woke up on election day, there's a half a foot of snow on the ground. And for many Vermonters, that can be an impediment when they have to get kids off to school, go to work. They may be infirmed in some way, and that's always a difficult challenge to get out and vote. And so we think that if they have that opportunity to do it ahead of time, that's a good thing for everybody and for our democracy. We also know that the Secretary of State's office took on this challenge, but we have to think about whether they need additional staff, whether they need technological upgrades in their systems. We know this is a problem throughout the Vermont government in terms of the Department of Labor. We see that with unemployment compensation, with the motor vehicle system. It's a very tenuous and kind of old system that the state is working with. And in order to have not only a safe election, but a secure election that all Vermonters feel confident in, we think that we have to make sure that there's sufficient funding to maintain an up-to-date technological system, particularly if we want at some point to expand any type of electronic voting system. We reserve comment on that because we don't know enough about as to what that would look like at this time. but we know that it was used for overseas and for military balloting. But if we were to expand it domestically, we would like to see more details of that before we have any comments. We certainly support a curing process. We got complaints from voters who said, I voted all my life. I'm a registered voter. I made one mistake in submitting my ballot, and now my ballot is not going to count. And, you know, to us, that's I don't want to say it's a crime, but it's something that should not be allowed to happen, that somebody who makes an honest mistake should be able to go back, correct their ballot, and make sure that their voice is heard in our democratic process. The last thing I want to comment on is that we've seen many times where candidates vote in a primary, they run in a primary in one party, and then when it comes to the general election, they change the primary part, what we call the principal party affiliation. And we've got complaints from Democrats, from non-Democrats that say, well, they don't understand that. Why is it that somebody says they're, say, party A in the primary, but when it becomes a general election, they're party B? And, you know, it's almost like a kind of a truth in advertising issue. If you are going to be in one party in the primary, that should be your principal party in the general election. Now, we're not saying that you cannot have another endorsement from another political party in the general election, but if you're in party A in the primary, you should be party A as your principal ballot line in the general election, and with a slash for party B if you're co-endorsed by another party. That's quickly kind of overview some of our main concerns. We will certainly be ready to testify and give additional information concerning in our views concerning more technical aspects of vote by mail and other issues at a later time. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the committee has.
Thank you. Any questions, committee members? Thank you, Bruce. Okay, I think we'll go to Pat for Campaign for Vermont, and I'm very happy because I had not seen your response. You are muted. People have been trying to do that to you for a long time.
I know
Pat.
exactly. Silence me. Forget it.
Yeah.
But anyway, thank you, Senator, for including us. We sent you a note that we would participate, and I just sent our list today, so it was my fault. But I wanted to add kudos. For the record, I'm the president of Campaign for Vermont, and we wanted to add kudos to the Secretary of State and to the town clerks. It's just an amazing process. The only thing I heard that we have on our list that no one else has talked about is the voter checklist itself. We know we've been very overly conservative, I think, with that list forever. And I think we should take a look at it to see if there's a way that it is not quite so inflated, particularly since we have same-day registration. If we make a mistake, it's easy enough to put somebody back on the list. And I think that there'll be a lot of money saved, a lot of time and effort saved to take a look at that list. Other than that, I agree with everything we've heard today, and we look forward to seeing the list and adding our comments. And I appreciate your including us, Senator. Thanks.
Thank you. And I will get those three missing lists together with all the others. And so thank you. So what I would like to do now, committee, I believe, unless anybody has any specific questions for anybody, I'd like to try to help get us in a committee discussion to organize our next steps on this, because this is a huge undertaking. And if we're going to do anything, we have to be organized and efficient about it. So what I have done up to this point is I've made, I made those categories before, but now I've made 6 different categories here's the categories that I made now in terms of going forward. Are there any of these suggestions that we can just automatically eliminate? Are there any that we agree on and that maybe we've passed before and can just agree on, or that would take very little conversation? Then I think the biggest issue here before us and the most philosophical change is the continuing the automatic mail out to all voters. So that's another category. Then there's a category that are there areas, there are things that would apply to mail-in votes, whether they're automatic or just by request, such as the elimination of the inner envelope, the expansion for electronic returns, multiple return options, use of drop boxes, the postmark, and early processing. Those are issues that, whether we went with automatic mail out to everybody or not, are issues that we should look at, because they will affect mail-in votes, regardless of whether it's automatic to everybody. Then there's a category of kind of administrative changes that will affect town clerks particularly, I think. The issue of nicknames on ballots, curing of ballots, the signature verification, the counting of write-ins, the clarifying defective ballots, and consistent polling hours across the state. Then there's a category that's administrative, but it's a little broader than just that, kind of beyond maybe the town clerks. And that's the suggestion to have only one checklist, and not to have a checklist but in each town, translation services, and the collection of data. Then there's kind of these some very miscellaneous ones, and that's the town clerk's independence from the select board, the review of major party requirements, and the faithless electoral issue. And I have no idea what that even means. It came in from somebody, and I think it's for the Electoral College, but I have no idea what that is. So those are some of the way I tried to break down the issues. Does that make any sense to committee members at all?
Sure.
So,
Yes, I think it's like one of those surveys you take where if yes, here, you go to down here. If no, you go someplace else. I think it's good, actually. It's great. Because if we decide not to do one thing, it means there's a whole lot of things then we don't have to discuss. But yeah, good.
Senator Rahm?
I'm fine. I think Jim, Secretary Kondos had his hand up, but I'm okay.
Well, I'm asking committee members first.
Oh, so I mean, generally, I would agree. I think that's a good approach. I have heard a lot about the faithless elector piece as a member of the Electoral College this year. I don't think there's any particular changes we need to make there. There was a Supreme Court case around it, but I think if the committee's interested, it's an interesting conversation about the way that the Electoral College isn't very standard across the states. Electors have very different rules they fall under in each state, but it's more
Yeah, I don't think we have time to go there. So, Senator Polina?
I think what you outlined is good. It's a lot, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's a lot to wade through. I hope that we can come up with ones that we think we can move forward together on, because there's general agreement on. That would help us feel like we build some momentum and get going on it. Just going back to Senator Rahm, I mean, about the Electoral College, I mean, we did pass national popular vote in the state of Vermont. So that relates to that a little bit anyway. We've made it clear that we'd rather see national popular vote.
Right. So, okay, Senator Kondos, Secretary Kondos, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just want to just remind the committee that everything that may be proposed may have a price tag to it. And that is something that has to be considered, because remember that for the most part, we only receive roughly $450,000 an election cycle for ballot printing. And that is based off the HAVA 2002, when the money came out in 2004 or 6. We were not able to assume the cost of stuff we were already doing. So that is the previous set of ballots that we get going forward. Like this past election, we had specific federal money that came to us to allow us to do what we did. We don't have enough money to do this, even in the future.
I would agree, but as we go through the issues, that'll be one of the questions that gets asked is, can it be done within our current budget standards? And I mean, that is going to have to be asked for many of these, not just, Will, did you have a comment?
Very quickly, Senator White. I would just encourage, I just want to point out, obviously the reforms we're talking about are very important to me and are going to have a huge effect on how elections run. I wanted to point out that I think that there are a number of the critically important and kind of central items that are common across a lot of these lists that we support, that the Coalition of Advocates support, and that the clerk support. And I just hope that the committee will pay attention to the items that seem to be supported by almost everybody in this room right now testifying to the committee. I think at some point it would be helpful to show what items are common across these lists and agreed to by all of the interested parties in the room.
I guess we could somehow do that. I thought that would probably become obvious when we took testimony on different issues. But so are there any on the list that we currently have, and I haven't seen the list from the two parties or campaign for Vermont, but are there any on the lists that we currently had that we can eliminate? And I can think of one right offhand. The 16-year-old vote, that would take a constitutional amendment. We can't do constitutional amendments this year.
Right, right.
So can we cross that one off?
Yes.
Committee?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes.
All right,
Yeah.
so gone. Okay. The, Keisha, Senator Rahm, you seem to indicate that there really wasn't anything around the faithless electoral issue.
Someone else could speak up, but I'll let Will speak up. I mean, I think,
okay.
I don't know who brought that up or what they wanted to change.
Just very quickly, I think it's a fine subject to consider. I want to make sure the committee's aware we have language in the law. Number one, the national popular vote you adopted a while ago, but also within the presidential election statute where it talks about the electors and the decisions they make. It's actually the very last sentence in the subchapter about presidential elections says that the electors shall vote for the candidates that receive the majority of the votes, for the party of the candidates that receive the majority of the votes in the election. So we have that language that is meant to address the faithless elector issue where it says you're tied, you're voting, you can't go rogue and vote against what the people in Vermont voted for. It's my understanding that those provisions are on the books in some number of states, and there's question about whether they're constitutional or not.
Well, if we have it on our statutes and we're not going to determine whether it's constitutional or not. So I would say we take that one off the list unless anybody wants to keep it on.
I would not advocate for making changes. And I think what other states have done after the Supreme Court decision in July is they said that you can legally, and you can all correct me if I'm wrong, you can legally charge penalties on somebody for going against their role in the Electoral College. No one put me under sort of pain of perjury and financial risk to do it. I think it was a fair process that asked me to commit to being a faithful elector, and I don't think we need to add anything to that section.
Okay, I've just crossed it off my list. Committee?
I'm all for taking it off.
Sure.
Okay. I should say we also have 3 or 4 bills in our committee now that deal with elections, and I will make sure that anything that's in those bills gets on the list. I think right now everything that's in those bills is also on the list, but I'll make sure that happens. So are there any issues on which we agree that we can maybe just take off the conversation table and do. And first, before I made a note to myself here that we were all busy thanking people. And I heard Will give a thank you the other day that was a really heartfelt thank you that I hadn't heard anybody give before, and that was to the Postal Service. And I just wanted to acknowledge their role in Vermont. And in some states, they might not have been very cooperative, but my understanding is that in Vermont they were. So shout out to them. So are there does anybody want to revisit, or do we just want to repass the corporate contribution that we passed before? And I will remind us that it is not a ban on corporate contributions. It isn't written that way. What it is it says that only individuals can contribute to candidates and their campaigns. That's all it says. Committee? Brian, Senator Collmore?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't think I voted for that last time, even though.
I don't remember if you did or not.
I'm pretty sure you didn't.
And I would not vote again for it.
Okay, so we'll leave that on the list for now then. Is there anybody that we have for a number of years asked for some kind of a study on public financing? Should we again ask for that? We can figure out the wording later, but.
Yes, I wish.
I think it's,
Okay, yes. Okay, Senator Polina, yes. Senator Rahm?
Senator Polina first, is that?
He just said yes.
I was just saying yes.
Oh, my clarifying question is they have not given us that study, or it never passed? The study never made it out? Why have we not gotten that study before?
It passed, I think it was S32 and it never got through the House.
Okay, yes, I would support that kind of stuff.
Allison?
I wish we actually had time to deal with it this session and not have to do a study. But given where we are and the amount on our plate with the continuing pandemic, I would say a study was where we ended up.
Senator Collmore?
Well, in deference to the Secretary of State's concerns about cost, I don't assume that this is going to be a free study.
Senator Polina?
I would just say that I don't think it's necessarily a very large study either. It's more like a report. Going back to what Senator Rahm mentioned before, she asked if other states had done something similar. And we know that Maine has done it and Connecticut has done it. And I think New Mexico or Arizona has done it. So it's really a question of having somebody talk to those folks and issue a report to us as to how other states have accomplished it. I don't think it's a huge study is all I'm saying.
Okay, we'll leave that on there and then we'll find out what it is. So there is one on the list that I found troubling. And I will just throw it out here and see where other people are. It was a requirement that in order to be a candidate for office, you had to have voted in every state or general election for which you were eligible.
For the 4 years you would be claiming residency.
Right. And I have an issue with that because I think we don't require voting, and I would find it hard to require that for candidates. But I leave that up to the committee about whether you want to have more conversation about that or not. Senator Clarkson?
But at least that's an issue that's actually not on our list requiring voting. It's one issue that no one raised. Only this issue with the candidate. So I agree that it's troubling because we all know that favorite bumper sticker of ours that I will restrain myself from sharing verbally in this committee. But things happen, and things happen inexplicably. And I think if it is, as much as I would like to ensure that every candidate voted, particularly in the last 4 years of a candidacy, it's hard to require it if we don't also require voting, period. I wish we sort of did require voting, but It didn't even make it on our list requiring voting.
Yes, it is on the list.
No, it's only for candidates, for candidates. Right,
It's
but that's
for
not
candidates.
requiring voting for all Vermonters.
No, it is a what's on the list is what I brought up. It is a requirement that to run for office, to be a candidate, you have to have voted in the state and general elections. Senator Collmore?
Well, I was going to ask that question. I didn't understand what you were, I didn't understand the question, I guess. If you're going to be a candidate for any office in Vermont?
I guess, and my concern is, why wouldn't we also require them to vote in local elections?
Well,
or
that's
school
my
board
question.
elections? Because those are equally as important as state elections.
That was the thrust of my question. If running for the Board of Aldermen or City Council or the school board, that you have to have voted for that in the past, to me, that's a little different than a statewide office. I see a distinction there, and I'm not sure that I even understand what's trying to be proposed.
Senator Ron, would you like to enlighten us?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, so I had read Senator White, the chairwoman's sort of summary in unintended summary in was it the Times Argus? I can't remember. And it was sort of a rundown of the committee having looked at a residency requirement before with some definition and coming up without that. It sounded like there is no actual definition of residency for the purposes of either the 2 years you're supposed to be a resident in your area for running for House and Senate, or the 4 years for statewide office. And so, I at some point just felt like the one thing I would think we would hope all candidates would do in the 2 or 4 years before they run for office is vote in those elections.
Well, there's a distinction about being a resident and about voting, right?
Yeah.
Yes, but
we don't have a definition of resident, because it sounds like you didn't define it based on tax liability or
we know
permanent residence somewhere.
we did not define it.
Right.
There are many definitions of resident for different purposes, and we could stab at a definition. I think it's futile.
In generally, it feels like it should either be defined or not required, but we don't have a definition of what residency is.
Well, it is required because it's in the Constitution. So
Right.
It is required, and we can't change that. We could come up with a definition, but we took hours and hours and hours of testimony, and the best thing we could come up with was that if there was a challenge, it would be the courts that would decide. Because if somebody is away at the Peace Corps for 3 years, does that disqualify them? No. If they're in the military service or Doctors Without Borders, it doesn't disqualify them. If they leave for 10 months to go take care of their ailing mother in another state, it does. So it is very, very complicated. But I do have, the committee can decide you want to put this requirement in, but I have a very serious issue about requiring people to vote in order to run as a candidate.
I think it's the one thing you could do if you were anywhere else if you called Vermont your mental home, you could still vote there while being in Washington, D.C. or abroad.
You could, but should it be required? That's Allison.
So in lieu of a residency definition in the election statutes, it is a proxy actually showing interest in Vermont and in our elections. Voting is actually a proxy for that engagement. And I have some sympathy for voting as a prerequisite for being a candidate, particularly if you're living abroad. So, I would hope that every candidate for every office up and down the ticket would be engaged enough in their community and in their state to have voted in 2 out of the you could maybe make it 2 out of the last 4 or something, but to not show any engagement by having voted is, to me, a problem. And if we have no residency definition, this is a proxy for engagement.
Senator Polina, you haven't weighed in.
Well, I think we're sort of meshing these two things together, residency requirement versus the need to vote in order to be allowed to run for office. I think that we don't in the United States of America and in Vermont, we don't require people to vote. Maybe that's something we should do down the road because there are certain countries where people are required to vote. I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing, but we don't do that here. I don't think it makes any sense to tell somebody they have to have voted in the past in order to run for office. If I'm 25 years old and I've never voted before, but I'm at a select board meeting or a town board, school board meeting or a legislative town hall, and I get inspired to run for office next year, I should be allowed to run for office next year because I'm inspired by what I experienced. It's too bad I didn't vote in the past, but if I get inspired one day to run for office, I should be able to do that without having a past requirement to have voted in previous elections.
Well, they have a different requirement at the local level for what you need to prove for your residency. But many of us who are young have gone through residency challenges, and we have had to at least weigh in and say how long we've lived in a certain community, so it might as well be standardized for us so that we're not just feeling under the threat of, well, I moved from one part of Burlington to another, as a student. I think it makes it clear for you, hey, this is what you need to be able to run. Those of us who are young in politics have had people question our residency. So, I'd rather have a clear definition.
Well, I can tell you right now that I won't support this because I think that what you're saying is anybody who runs for a state, any office, or has to have voted in whatever residency it is that they're, so 4 years, they would have to have voted in every state and general election for 4 years.
That's to run for statewide office.
To run for statewide. To run for the Senate or the House, you would have to have voted in. And I think if you're going to do that, they should have been required to vote in their local elections also. Not just in the statewide elections, in their local elections, because those local elections are very important. Other people can weigh in here, but I am not going to support this. I'm a vote against it. So Will, I see you had a.
Yeah, Will was
really quick, but I want to correct the record and make sure everybody's clear. There is a residency definition in the elections laws. Title 17 has one. It defines what residency means for the purpose of voter registration.
Right.
The question here is there's a lot of different residency definitions across the state statutes, and it's not clear which one should be applied to the residency language in the Constitution.
Yes.
Back when we were talking about graph, people suggested that of any of those, right, since you're kind of in the election realm, looking at the one in Title 17 might make the most sense, but that's certainly not clear. And that one allows you, right? It's off the top of my head, intent to maintain a primary dwelling place in the town and to return there if temporarily absent. So that definition contemplates temporary absence and still having a maintenance of residency, but I'll leave it at that. I wanted to be clear on the record.
Yeah, you're right. I shouldn't have said there was no definition, but there, yeah. So committee members, if we want to continue, get more testimony on this issue, I'm willing to do that. I personally think there are other issues that we need to address, but I'll leave it to the committee members if you want to take more testimony on this. Senator Collmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I kind of enjoy this role. I'm not on the fence too often. I'm either in or out, and it's pretty clear to me, but I'm on the fence. So I think with all due respect to your position, which I also understand, I would like to take more testimony, at least understand this a little bit better before I make a decision. Thank you.
Okay. All right. We will take more. I don't know who we will get to testify, but we will take more testimony. Senator Clarkson?
If it hadn't been an issue in a couple of elections and with a couple candidates in the last 6 years, I'd feel differently, but it's an issue. And I think it's one we should discuss further. I'm not sure it's one we'll maybe have enough time to actually, given the scale of some of the other ones, but I think it's bubbled to the surface enough for us to discuss it further.
Okay, I think that we will really need to define this clearly then about which elections they have to have voted in and how many. Anyway, okay. We'll
Senator
put
White,
it on
can I
the
make
list.
one more quick
Yeah.
comment on that? I'm
Yeah.
really sorry. I think if you're thinking about other people to bring in, I would consider bringing in somebody maybe from the Attorney General's office or Ledge Council to talk
Yeah.
about the constitutionality of such a requirement. And then I just wanted to say to what Senator Clarkson was just saying, it has been an issue. And I will add to that we get a lot of questions in our office about, what people thinking about running, what do those residency requirements mean? I don't think the answer to that necessarily is a requirement that you voted, although that could be considered. But I do think bringing clarity to what residency means in that context would be useful.
Boy, we could try that again. I do have to tell you that I think Senator Polina and Senator Clarkson were both on and I don't know if you were there, Senator Collmore, or not, but we had hours and hours of testimony, hours. And some people said you have to be here every single day of the year. You can't leave. Some people said 181 days. Some people said 2 years out of 4. So it is an issue, but I don't think we're going to solve it. But anyway, okay. So are there some of these, I'm looking at the clock, are there some of these administrative changes that are relatively easy to address? And this I'll ask committee members and Carol and Will that are maybe easy to address and would be helpful to you, but aren't big philosophical issues, like the nickname on a ballot. Is that a relatively simple one? Carol.
I think that one is relatively simple. I think the ballot drop boxes is relatively simple.
Mm-hmm.
I would hope that creating some kind of opportunity for early processing of ballots, whether it's 30 days, whether it's a week, whether it's 2 weeks, whatever. I think that that's something that sounded like there was universal support behind.
Mm-hmm. How about the clarification of defective ballots?
I think that definitely needs to be figured out along with the conversation around curing. I think that we all want to find an opportunity to do that. When we get down into the discussion about how that happens, there will obviously be differences of opinion. Clerks are concerned that we're going to be asked to somehow reach out to people and figure out how to do that.
Madam
Senator
just while we're talking about mail-in balloting, I did notice that Audrey Klein from National Vote at Home is here, and I didn't know if she had wanted to say something. So. Oh,
I'm sorry. I didn't. Okay, I do see. I knew that that you had submitted something, but did you want to say a few words? I'm sorry.
Hello, ma'am. No problem. I can actually do you one better. My CEO is actually on the line, and she can speak to just a couple things that didn't really come up on the list already, and we'll limit our testimony to those pieces if it's okay. But we also want to sort of stand behind the secretary and the clerks and everything that's been said today. So I'm going to kick it over to Amber McReynolds, if that's all right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Audrey, and thank you to everyone for giving us a minute today to speak. we're again want to congratulate Vermont Secretary Condos, the legislature, for taking initiative last year in 2020 during a very difficult year to make this process even better. And I want to commend you for being, I think, the 7th highest increase in turnout of all states in the country. Significant. Many states that did mail a ballot are in that top echelon for states that saw big increases, and not being a swing state is truly a remarkable thing to celebrate. So we're very, very pleased with that. Our organization is a nonpartisan nonprofit, and we focus on helping states improve vote by mail access and systems. And so that's our technical expertise. I ran elections for 13 years in Denver, Colorado, and helped write the legislation that we ultimately passed 8 years ago. So we know what works. We're happy to be a resource for all of you. Two things that we mentioned in our testimony that we submitted that did not get talked about much today includes ballot tracking. That's an issue and a technology platform that we've been working on for many years. It's actually been a system that Denver, Colorado has used for now 11 years. It's just like tracking a package through when you order something online, but for your mail ballot. And it automates the notification of issues. So if the ballot is undeliverable or a signature or an affidavit isn't completed properly, it can automate all of those notifications so that a voter can get a text or an email right away when there's any issue. And it provides that extra accountability and transparency and security for where the mail ballot is in the process. So I think that's a really good item to consider in terms of a technical enhancement for Vermont going forward. And then of course, national change of address data and sort of automating address updates broadly is always something that we want to encourage states to do. And then finally, risk limiting audits. This is, a lot of states enhanced their ability to audit this year. We think that's a key component of a good election system that provides that transparency and that confirmation that everything operated the way it should. And mail ballots, being paper ballots, are a big component as to why risk limiting audits have been so successful in states like Colorado and elsewhere that have adopted them. So encouraging Vermont to continue to move forward on initiatives that expand those opportunities is also something that we wanted to share and encourage today. And again, I just commend you all for your willingness last year to empower Secretary Condos to do what needed to be done during a pandemic. And you should all be very proud of where you've put Vermont in terms of states that provided access, and then also obviously increased turnout in a very big way. So congratulations to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you. And do I understand that we have a local resident who's working with you who could actually represent you also at some of our meetings?
Yeah, so certainly Audrey's our national policy director, and then we do have a couple of folks in Vermont that are definitely champions for Vote at Home and can be certainly available as a resource. So feel free to use all of us in that way, whatever is convenient and good for you.
Good.
I hate to cut in. This is Audrey. I think, Senator, you might have been mentioning Peter Sterling, who is our lobbyist there. He sends his regards, and he's been doing a great job. We're just loving Vermont.
We just want to get him in here on the hot seat.
Happy to do it anytime.
Okay, great. Those were good suggestions. Also, they will be put onto the list also. So just going back, can I ask if multiple return options isn't easy? Senator Collmore?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can we go back to your first list? I was scribbling as fast as I could. Nicknames.
Okay, let's see. I think you mean the kind of ones that might be, that Carol mentioned that might be good, like nicknames.
Yeah, so let's talk about that if we could. I assume what you mean is I just want to understand that somebody would not be able to use a nickname. Is that correct?
Well, no, we just need to clarify what they can and can't do.
Oh, okay. All right.
I think that's the question. Can you use them? Can't you? Yeah.
Okay.
But just, so we haven't made a decision about them, but I think that Carol's comment was that it probably wouldn't be that complicated to decide what the policy is.
Okay.
On nicknames, and on early processing
Ballot boxes.
and drop boxes, and I wondered about multiple return options because you're going to have ballots that get mailed out, whether we do an automatic mail out to everybody or not. You're going to have ballots that can mail back in because people request them.
Absentee,
So
yeah, sure.
right. So is multiple return options an easy one to tackle?
Okay, yep.
I think so.
Carol, do you agree? Will?
Yeah, what would be nice would be to have some clarification about a ballot that's mailed out and then brought back in person by a voter who wants to feed it into the tabulator themselves.
Okay.
Just having some clarification about process.
Okay.
We'll put that in there. And is the inner, Will?
I think that's an easy one too. I was just going to note that in my mind, the statute currently allows for multiple return options and is pretty flexible in that regard, but that implementing and putting more clarity around secure drop boxes is where that was headed. I think that was language in the VPIRG list. I don't know if
it came from many places.
Okay.
I purposely did not assign the comments to anybody because I wanted them to, I felt it was important to not assign them because then they took on almost a position, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So is the inner envelope, is that a relatively easy one or not? I know a lot of states don't use the inner certificate envelope.
Secretary Condos has his hand up.
Oh, okay, thanks.
I would say it's easy. Remove it from the list. I mean, we do not support, we think it's a terrible idea to remove the inner envelope. I know that it's problematic, but it's really our only link to make sure that we get an identity.
Okay, well, it isn't that, I didn't mean easy, just take it off the list, because some people have suggested that it is a solution. So I wanted to know what things are easy that might be non-controversial and relatively easy to get settled. Is there anything else on this list that is would be easily non-controversial and easily settled so that we can, as much as possible, what I want to do is go through these and not have constant conversation about them over and over and over again. But either we're going to get rid of them because nobody agrees, or we're going to say they're easily fixed, where we can come to some easy decisions on them, like the nickname, and then we don't have to keep talking about them. We can get them off the list and we can go on to the things that are more controversial. That's what I mean by easy. So is there anything else on here that seems to be of that nature that is just, yes, Secretary Condos?
So just so the committee understands, we've already engaged with the Center for Civic Design to look at our certificate envelope, the inner envelope that the ballot goes in, to ask them to help us design that better and make it more clear, more concise.
Okay.
And so people understand. We would not support. When I said it was easy to remove it because we would not support getting rid of it.
Secretary Condos, we don't want the arguments now for or against. All we want now is a list of things that we think are relatively non-controversial that we can decide on and then take them off the list. That one clearly has some difference of opinions, and we'll address it when we put it on the agenda. Am I?
You got it.
Making any sense here?
Yep.
Okay, so is there anything else on that list that is non-controversial that we could just put on for our very first discussion and just decide on them, and then they're done with that conversation and move on to the next level. Is there anything else on here that strikes anyone as very simple?
How many items did you read off, Madam Chair?
I read off multiple return options, use of Dropbox, early processing, nickname, and then defective ballots, and it was paired with curing, but I'm not sure that it has to be. We need clarification on what is a defective ballot and whether it goes along with curing or not, I don't know, but that's what I read off.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to, I will send out this kind of list that I made. If people think I'm going down the wrong track here, let me know. But I think, is Senator Clarkson?
Yeah, I also think there are things on your list we could just take off the list. And that way we don't even need to discuss them at all.
Well, I asked for those and nobody suggested
I'm
any.
sorry, I didn't. Well, I mean, there are ones that I'm not sure I understand. I mean, presidential nominating process. What does that mean? I mean, we don't.
Well, somebody
somebody
submitted it, so we might
So
be.
I would
we might
suggest-
take.
Okay. I didn't hear anybody bring it up. And of all the people we've had here today, it strikes me we could take that off. We could.
Well, it was
I
on
don't
the
know-
Secretary of State's list.
Oh, it was? He didn't mention it.
No, he didn't, but they had a long list that
Okay.
included a lot more detail than.
Okay. I would need to know what they were wanting to discuss about it. I mean, I think that
Right.
sadly it has, I mean, there are issues with it. There's no question, but, and then who put review the major party requirements on the list?
The Secretary of State did. I think that
okay.
is an issue.
Were not mentioned. Okay, great. Then we can discuss them. I just had heard nobody else bring them up and I thought maybe we could take those off altogether, but I guess not if the Secretary of State's put them on that list.
Well, I think that, yes, Senator Rahm and then Secretary Condos.
Well, this is an unrelated topic, so I let Secretary Condos jump in.
Okay.
About this topic.
So some of the stuff, Senator White, that was on that initial list that we had presented to you a while ago, were things that were brought to us. Just like you've had people bring to you, some of this was stuff that was brought to us. When I saw your list about the presidential nominating process, I too questioned what does that mean? Because
I have no idea. You brought it to us.
well, I wouldn't say we were talking about the nominating process. We were talking about the we were hearing from people that were concerned that we had 21 candidates for president on the list this year. That was largely because of the number of the waiving of signatures this year. But the other question is, do we make any changes to, for instance, right now it's I think it's 1,000 signatures, and there was some talk about making it 2,000 signatures, some talk about making it certain number of counties.
If I can say, that's why I put it on the list, because there were questions about it. And I didn't put all the details on there, and maybe I should have, but somebody brought up the presidential nominating process. And so I put it on the list. Then, so clearly, I guess that isn't one we can just get rid of, because there are issues around it. Am I right or not?
There was just some questions that we wanted to raise with the committee.
Well, that's why it's there.
I know when I spoke earlier today, I spoke I highlighted just specific items that I think almost everybody agrees with as a real focus to go forward. We could take your list and go from the top and work our way down one by one and have a discussion about each one, a brief discussion, take it off or leave it on.
That's what I'm trying. That's what I'm trying to do right now, is if there are issues here that we took off the 16-year-old vote because that's a constitutional issue, right? So we took it off the list. We talked about taking off the requirement to vote. We decided not to take that off the list. We decided not to take off campaign contributions or the public financing study. We took off the faithless electoral issue because there isn't an issue there. Now what we're trying to do is look at the issues that may be, if we ever get to them, that may be non-controversial that we can just address and get rid of. I mean, either accept them or get rid of them. I don't mean get rid of them as in not doing anything about them, but have the brief discussion and come to some resolution. Can people use nicknames or not? It seems pretty simple. We can just do that and then we don't ever have to talk to it about it again. Am I completely speaking out of my ear?
Not completely.
Thank you, Senator Foley.
No, I think we're grappling with it. It's always difficult to have a list like this and try to grapple your way through it. I think, we're doing a good enough job. I really do. I think it's hard what we're trying to do. I think
so I'm going to send it out again in a different format. So Senator Rahm.
Yes. Well, I mean, first of all, to that question, Madam Chair, I would just say I am new to the Senate, but in my 8 years in the House, it was almost a curse to call something so simple that it didn't need any testimony or consideration. So that might be why you hear some hesitancy on my part in any way to bless something as simple. So, I love simple issues, but they never are simple in the end. So, I think all of these merit discussion, but I'm also new, so I don't know what's already taken all of your time up. And in that vein, I have a question, and I really am asking out of ignorance to how this process has unfolded in the past, but do you usually take up local questions of non-citizen voting as charter changes completely unrelated to an elections bill? Or would we?
No, that's a charter change.
Okay. Because I think it has related questions to the residency question, because many of them have had different ideas of what you would do to have to prove that you are not a citizen, but a resident of that community. So
we can address some of those when we talk about that issue, but we would never take up that particular issue for any town without a charter before us.
Right. Yeah. So I just wanted to flag it as there are pieces of that where they have, I think, different residency components that they've put in that we should explore with the residency question.
All right. So I will tell you right now that at our next meeting, I will have a list for us, yet another list, and you can throw away all the other lists, but we will be taking up the issues of multiple return options, use of drop boxes, early processing, nicknames, presidential nominating process, and the clarification of defective ballots. And maybe more, but does that make any sense to anybody?
Yes.
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 Okay, and there might be more on the list. So anybody who wants to testify on those particular issues and anything else we put on the list for next week, then be prepared to address those issues, not and any other issues that end up on the thing, not the issue of should we have one checklist statewide. Oh, the other one I think that might be relatively simple is consistent polling hours across the state. That was on somebody's list.
Sure.
Yes.
So we'll take that up at the same time.
Yes.
And I'm not implying that they're simple questions. I'm just implying that they aren't major philosophical changes as mail out ballots and what goes around along with them is. Okay. Committee, thank you. And thank you for indulging me with these all these lists and things. But Keisha, I will tell you that one of the ways that this committee passed what I thought was a relatively elegant bill a number of years ago was the medical marijuana dispensaries. And the way we did it is we took the lists from everybody, and in that case, it was law enforcement and the advocates. And we took those two lists and we put them together and we started going through the issues one by one by one by one. And we came up with a really good bill because we addressed the issues, and they didn't always agree, but we came up with an answer to each of the issues.
Mm. And so I just want to, so far say, I really love this. I think you've put out, far and wide, casting a net for elections issues. I just didn't want my face or my silence to say like, I either agree or disagree on something. I just, whenever someone said something simple, I didn't know what that meant in this committee's context, which is
oh yeah. And it doesn't necessarily mean you agree.
Yes.
It just means that maybe there's a solution, an easy solution.
Right.
It just means they're ones we can check off sooner rather than later.
Exactly. And then when we check them off, we never go back to them.
Exactly. And
actually, we've checked off a couple of the things on this list and have already actually passed them out of the Senate.
Hmm.
And we're returning to them. I might point out.
Well, because I think Senator Collmore asked us to return to the campaign contributions, and they will just look at what the public financing study is and what it means, what we passed before.
Sure.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for your input. It was really, and I hope you join us as we go forward here. And I will make sure that these other three suggestions, four actually, because the vote at home also, and campaign for Vermont and the Republican and Democratic parties. I'll make sure that those ideas get incorporated into the list. And I realize that some may be more weighty and have more support than others, but that doesn't mean that the ones that aren't acknowledged as an issue by a large number of people aren't important. So, okay, thank you so much. Now we get to deal with retirement issues.
Madam
Yes.
Chair, we have been sitting for, we consider what we promised ourselves
yes.
to do?
We are going to take a 5-minute break so that we can run up and down the stairway and get a drink of water.
And 25 jumping jacks.
Debbie, what are you doing? I'm having a meeting.
Are we coming back?
Yes.
Okay.
Senator Collmore, your dog is so sweet. My dog is like running around outside in the snow being a terror right now.
Oh, thank you. I'm sure she'll be up on my lap in a minute to get fed.
Keisha, sometimes Isabel gets up on Ryan's and puts her paws on there and kisses him. It's so sweet.
So sweet. I wish my dog could be that sweet.
I used to work with a woman who was about 5'1" and as thin as a rail. And she had 2 Great Danes, and they did the same thing to her.
Wow.
I know. All right, if we're all back, let's move on. So there's some relatively interesting changes being suggested to the retirement system, and we've heard a little bit of it in different snips here and there. So we've asked the treasurer and Erica, who I believe runs the retirement section, to join us today. And we also have with us VSEA and NEA. Thank you for joining us. I think I was remiss, Jeff, in not getting that out sooner to you.
No problem at all, Senator. All
Thank you.
good on here. Thank you.
So with that, do you, I'm going to just turn it over to the two of you to present to us what the issue is, what the problem is, and what your proposed, some of your proposed solutions. And then know that I don't know how much testimony we'll actually get to today, but we need to know what it is and what you're proposing, and then we'll go from there again. So Beth, Treasurer Pierce, would you like to join us, and Erica?
Yes, thank you. For the record, Beth Pierce is State Treasurer, and Erica Wolfing is our Director of Retirement, and I have 2 other staff on the call so that they can interject when I'm going off in the wrong direction. That's Ashlyn Doyon, who's our Policy Director, and Will Krewald, who's our Chief Financial Officer. So I got a great team, and they're here to assist in answering any questions. And what we can't answer today, we will certainly come back to you with more information.
Thank you. Just before you start, can I ask you what you would prefer in terms of committee questions, not from other people, but from committee questions? If you would prefer to go through your entire presentation first and then have us ask questions, or how you would like to do that?
Well, I'm comfortable either way. I think that having a dialogue through this, number one, as you know, sometimes I can get caught up with what I'm doing, and it might be better. No, never happens, right? So it might be beneficial to have that interjection and questions as we go. And I also will apologize up front. As you know, sometimes, especially with pensions, I get caught up in the weeds. So if I'm doing that, please pull me back out of the weeds there.
Well, I think weeds is what we need at this point, so that's okay. And so committee, what I would say is if you, I'll be watching, so if you have a question, just raise your hand and I'll interrupt Beth, okay?
All right. Well, thank you very much. And again, for the record, Beth Pierce, the State Treasurer, and we are making some recommendations and with respect to the retirement plans, the state and the teacher's plan. We would rather not be making these recommendations now. It's a very tough time for folks. I want to compliment the staff, both the education staff and the VSEA and the troopers, for being on the front line in the middle of COVID. They're heroes, in my opinion, and we need to to address this now, because I do believe in our employees. I do believe in defined benefit plans, and I do believe that that is the best way to provide retirement security for our employees across the board. We're now having to look at some very tough recommendations, and I don't make these recommendations lightly. They're painful, and but we need to have a serious look at this to address the problems that we do have in the pension system, so it will be there for employees, and that we can make sure that we have a sustainable system that provides retirement security. In 2019, we actually began a risk review process. At that point, the unfunded liabilities for the state were roughly $815 million and $1.5 billion for unfunded liabilities for the teachers system. And at that point, what we heard loud and clear from the General Assembly is that we needed to address these and to lower these numbers. Those numbers are now in the rearview mirror, as we've had an increase in those liabilities by $604 million and an increase in the state's required contribution by just over $96 million. So we need to address these now. If the problem was significant and imperative a year ago, it is even more imperative that we address these at this point in time. I do want to say thank you to the various employee groups and staff that have been involved in working with us. I want to say thanks again to the VSEA, the VTA, and the NEA staff and senior members of their organization. We've met since mid-December. Probably at least weekly, most times twice a week with each group to try to grapple with these issues and to come up with some solutions. It was my belief that we should start with the stakeholders, the folks that are in the system, and have those conversations. Then bring you folks into the conversation as well as the administration and other stakeholders. We're all in this together, but we wanted to hear from the employees first and what this meant and how we could address it together. Now, I've met and my staff have met with the executive committees. I know that's not quite the term that's used in each group, but the executive committees of the VTA, the NEA, and the VSEA. I met with over 100 members of the VSEA Council, and we had a town meeting. I thought it was around 800 folks that were on, but Jeff, I think the last time I talked to you, you said there were about 1,000 teachers on that town meeting. So we went over the information with them. And then that same night, we had about 350, and again, that's an estimate of state employees on a Zoom or a Teams call. I'm not the best with technology. And we had a 3-hour question and answer period with that. I've met with the VSEA Chittenden County chapter. So we're trying to work with folks, get their recommendations, listen to their issues, listen to their concerns. I would rather not be bringing these to these respective groups, but we do need to address this. It's painful, but we think that getting the message out, stating it like it is, and seeing what we can do together to resolve it is incredibly important. I did receive Steve Howard's letter, which he's going to review, I would assume, in his testimony today. And I want to thank him on a number of fronts. One, as I'm looking at the letter, that committed to continuing a dialogue with the members of the General Assembly and myself to identify an equitable and sustainable solution. And I do want to say thank you very much. I think that's the tenure of the conversations that we've had with you folks. And I want to thank Amy, and I want to thank Mike O'Neill and Steve for the good work they've done on that side, and the good work from the folks in the NEA as well, with Jeff representing them today. Going back to Steve's memo, they also had 14 educational sessions with their membership. And again, I want to thank you. I think that's incredible that you're reaching out and getting their thoughts in this. During that session, the question and answer session, we heard loud and clear about some of the concerns, some of the issues, and some of the pain involved in this. And again, we wish that we did not have to bring this to you, but if we do not, I believe that there will be a real threat to the structure of the system and its sustainability over time. Steve's memo mentions the rule of 90, which we'll explain in a bit what that means, and finding a dedicated revenue source. I'm all in now finding a dedicated revenue source and working with that. I understand that there may be, and I'm very hopeful that it sounds like Congress might be able to get this done by February, another relief bill, hopefully with some money that has no strings attached to it. We've received a lot of dollars. We received the largest single deposit in the history of the state when 1.25 billion was sent to the state in the first CARES Act money, but it had strings attached to it. And what we need is money that we can use to address this system. And when those dollars are in, and the current dollars and the current situation in terms of our revenue estimates, I'm going to be first in line in having that conversation with the money committees and with you folks to try to access those dollars. A few years back, there was a item in statute that said that after all reserves are fully funded, any surplus that was left, that half of it would go to a pre-funded health fund. And what I would recommend is continuing on that line, but make it a 4-bucket reserve. In other words, the money that goes in there could be used to fund either the pensions or either the health benefit funds for state employees and teachers. And so I do want to have that conversation with the money committees, with you folks, have a better understanding of where you are in terms of the budget and your plans around the use of those dollars, and continuing off as you start the process with the governor's budget, and then work your way through both the House and the Senate appropriation committees. Again, we commend the folks for working on this. We commend the employees and their respective associations for having a very direct conversation with us, sometimes very blunt, and but also respectful. And I just want to again say thank you on that. What I would like to do is go through a PowerPoint that we sent to you a little earlier today. We have the report, and that report has been sent to you. It's also on the front page of our website. And what I'd like to do is go through a PowerPoint that we've sent over to try to summarize those issues and hopefully work through some of your thoughts and some of your comments on that. And we'd love to hear new ideas. We'd love to hear ideas that we can incorporate into the ultimate goal of finding a solution. So I'm going to begin.
Madam Chair, can I just?
Yes, I'm sorry. Senator Ron.
I just wanted to make a technical point. We got an email saying the state IT system is down, and I can't move anything on the website. I don't know if anybody else.
It is down.
Yes.
You can't access the website right now.
Janet just came in here. I'm in the State House right now. She just came in here and said that our email is down. So if I lose you, that's why. Okay. But yes.
Okay. So our website can't pull things. So as long as we're sharing screen or whatever.
Okay. Are we sharing the screen? Does someone have
that? Yeah, Beth, this is Erica. I'm prepared to share the screen right now.
Oh, you're wonderful. Thank you. She's wonderful regardless, but thank you for doing this. Okay, there you go. And as soon as you did that, I lost the page, so give me a second. There we go. Okay. So want to start off by going through this and again, it's kind of define the problem and then what some of the possible solutions are, and then where do we take it from there. So if you can go to the first page. Okay, this is a look at the funding progress, or to be very candid, the lack of progress we've had in terms of dealing with the unfunded liability for the states.
Oh, sorry, given we're having to look at this, can we make it a little bigger? Is that possible? Given we're not able to look at it on our iPads, we have to look at it here. That would be helpful.
Okay. There you go.
There you go.
Thanks.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Erica. So if you take a look at this and you go down, if you're going to scroll down just a little bit, Erica, to the year 2007, you see that in 2007, the state system, the unfunded liability was actually a surplus. So you see that number in 2007 in the $11 million. That in parentheses there is a negative, but that means it's a good thing. It's not a liability, it's a surplus. So they came into the Great Recession, the VSERS system, in very good shape. Unfortunately, the Great Recession did hit, and you see that the numbers from 2009 to 2010 all the way to 11 were some tough numbers, a lot of reduction because of the impacts of the Great Recession. Nationwide, pension funds were hit with 30% losses during that period. So you see that the unfunded liability, the surplus, the fully funded, went from 100.8, and you get into 2010 about 81.2. Now, the Society of Actuaries would say that 80% is a well-funded position. However, you also need to be going in the right direction in terms of getting to 100%. And as you look at this, we're not going in the right direction. We're going in the wrong direction. We're talking about 79, 77, 75, 71, and now in 2020, with the most recent valuation, 66.4% funded. That is very low, and it's, as I said, heading in the wrong direction. A good part of that change from 2019 to 2020 was, in fact, changes to our assumptions around demographics as well as rate of return, the interest rate of return. About 30% of it in the state system was demographics, mortality, how long people are going to live, retirements, what is the experience that we've seen, the number of retirements, and what is the turnover of staff? What are the salaries, and how do they relate to the original assumptions? Because those have an impact on what the individual will earn in retirement. So if you go to the next page, and we have the same chart for the teachers. And there we go. And you see that coming into the Great Recession, scroll it up just one more. There you go. There you go. Perfect. You see that in 2007, they came into the Great Recession in a less well-funded position. In the 80s, but still a lower position. Some of that, a substantial amount of that, was related to historic underfunding. From 1990 to 2007, the state did not put in the requisite amount of dollars to fund the system and to retire the unfunded liability. At one point, it was 38% of what the actuary recommended. And I've said many times before, you can't invest a promise to do better later. You need to have real cash to invest. And the system suffered because of that. As you come in, however, and you take a look beyond that, you see that the numbers dropped substantially, but they've gone in the wrong direction as well. And a lot of that is related to demographics as well. And again, when you get to 2020, both the interest rate assumption and the demographics play a role here. As I said, in the state system, about 30% of it was demographics and 70% was economic, primarily the rate of return. In the teacher system, it's 50-50. So the demographics are having an equal impact as the rate of return. Again, some of that's mortality. There is a large percentage of change over the last several years, as you go through 2010 to 2020, that's related to turnover in the teacher system, in the workforce, and the number of retirements. And I strongly believe that that's associated with some of the reorganization that we've seen at the local level, and the issues around student-teacher ratios, and again, just a change in behaviors due to those reorganizations. Now, anecdotally, I was in Montpelier at the bookstore down the road one time, and many times actually, I do like to go there. But the woman behind the counter said to me, I'm a former teacher, and I left because the deal they gave me was so good I had to leave now. And what that was similar to what the state's retirement incentive program was in 2010 and 2016, a cash payout to have that individual retire earlier than expected. What that does provide is for the local school to provide fill that position potentially with lower salaries or restructure what they're doing, or not fill that position, but lower essentially their operating costs, but it added cost to the retirement system. This year, we saw a record number of teacher retirements. All retirements were about 498 in the month of July. And Erica, I have to say this again, she did a wonderful job. Her staff were fantastic. Every single person that put in their retirement papers were timely received their retirement. That they received it at the end of the month. Incredible work on her part. But we did see an uptick in retirements. Part of it's related to a benefit change that took effect there, as well, however, as COVID. And we can't differentiate between the two, but clearly there's been a number of turnover and workforce issues that have had a negative impact on the teachers' retirement. If you could go to the next slide, please. This is where we are at right now. In 2019, based on that valuation, you use the 2019 valuation for the 2021 budget. And again, obviously the 20 for the 22 budget. In 2019, in the state system, the unfunded liability was $815.5 million. In the ADEC, which means the actuarially determined employer contribution, how much the state needs to put in with employee contributions, with the earning of interest in our fund, so that we can retire the unfunded liability by 2038, which is a date set in statute to do that. That was $83.9 million. Based on the experience study, we saw that both move up, that it was about a $217 million increase as a result of the experience study. And again, what an experience study does is it takes a look at the assumptions and it resets those assumptions. So by statute, every 5 years, we go take a look at how do those assumptions do in the past over the last 5 years, and what do we think is going to happen in the future? This is and how do we need to retool or reset those assumptions, which included the interest rate, the rate of return assumption. We do not do that work. What we do is receive reports from the actuary. So we have an independent actuary give us those changes in assumptions. The boards review them, and then we'll make a motion to pass those, ask for more information as needed, and essentially we use an independent actuary, not our gut feeling to try to set these assumptions. In the case of the rate of return, that assumption has to be approved by both the VPIC, the Vermont Pension Investment Committee, and all 3 boards of trustees. If it is not, then it doesn't change from the previous period. So the previous period, the previous assumption was in 2017 was 7.5%. The board, the VPIC and the 3 boards voted to change that to 7% this year. I know in Steve's memo, it mentions that there was a range presented to us from 7 to 7.25. We had extensive discussions about that. When the actuaries presented their information, they presented the midpoint at 7.15, but during the course of the meeting pointed out that we would have better confidence and a much more likely event of meeting our actuarial gains instead of having losses if we went to 7.0, which is what ultimately the board voted to do. But again, as you see this, it changed the unfunded liability substantially, as well as the ADEC, the actuarially determined employer contribution. We did, subsequent to the experience study, we did another valuation, and we do that annually. And that added a bit to this. Actually, that tells me that the assumptions were in pretty good shape. We ended up with a $225 million increase in the unfunded liability, and that the amount of money that would need to be appropriated by the General Assembly to meet the obligations would have to go from 83.9 to almost 120 million, a $36 million increase in the appropriation. If you go to the next page, the same process, we had a 2019 valuation, which had a $1.5 billion unfunded liability for the teachers system. Based on that experience study, it moved up to 1,880,000,000, which is a $326 million increase in the unfunded liability. And that again was 50-50. Part of it was rate of return, and the other half was demographics and experience. Again, retirements and turnovers and salaries and the like. That then was fed into the 2020 val, and you saw a substantial increase over that. You see another 50 some odd million there to the unfunded liability, and that was primarily again in retirements and turnover was what we saw as the factor there, and it continues to be something that we need to continue to look at that and how the workforce changes across the state are impacting the retirement system. That resulted in a $60 million increase in the unfunded liability combined between, a 379 plus the 225, a $604 million increase in the unfunded liability, and a $96.6 million increase in the appropriations that the state would be required to do to get us to full funding by 2038. Again, if the numbers before, if the 815 million and the 1.5 billion were considered unacceptable and we needed to do something, getting another $604 million on top of it means we need to do something now and get this resolved. I am concerned that when you take a look at the state system, in the 60s, in the teacher system, hovering around the low 50s, we get into the 40s, it's a really bad place to be in terms of your unfunded liability and the concerns that we would have. I took a estimate of what this would do in terms of the need of dollars to pay for this over time. And I'm going to pull up my spreadsheet. I guess I'm not, but by 2030, that number, the combined amount of money that you would have to put in the system as part of that mortgage plan, the amortization of that unfunded liability, and to retire it by 2038, the combined amount would be $402 million. By 2038, it would be $512 million. So we're talking about $500 million in 2037, 2038, which is a pretty big growth in the unfunded liability, in the required contributions. If you go to the next page. So we reviewed a number of issues and ideas and factors to see if we could lower this unfunded liability. And this is a summary of some of those. We took a look at increasing employee contributions, various scenarios on that. We looked at the changes to either reductions or eliminating the cost of living adjustments for active employees upon retirement. I want to emphasize that this office did not recommend any changes to cost of living increases for current retirees. My belief is that when they retire, they had a set retirement, they're in retirement, and that should not be changed. But we did have to take a look at COLA as a factor or variable in terms of what we could do to lower those unfunded liabilities. Simply, the COLA has the largest single impact in terms of reductions to that. And they're really the core of our recommendation. That said, there are different ways to address that, and we'll see some of that in the options that we present. We also took a look at the average final compensation, which is you take in the state system for the classified folks and the folks that are in Group F, which is primarily the folks that are represented by the VSEA. They have a 3-year AFC. So you take the 3 consecutive highest years of salary, you multiply that by the years of service, and you multiply that by an increment or percentage to calculate what your benefit is to be in retirement. Our look was if you increase the period of time for that AFC, there would be some savings because you're doing it over an average of a longer period of time and presumably lower salary levels, which would have an impact on benefits. We took a look at vesting. Right now, the vesting period is 5 years. We took that off the list rather quickly because we actually found that It had no impact on the unfunded liability, and a minor increase in the ADEC. So it really was not something that we continue to be on the table. We also took a look at what's called the Rule of 87 and the Rule of 90, which is a provision in terms of adding age and years of service to calculate what the requirement would be for normal retirement. For instance, and Erica, if I get this wrong, please let me know. But the majority of state employees in Group F, right now it's 62 years and or 62 years of age or 30 years to be eligible for normal retirement. And I believe that is for folks that were hired prior to 7108. And again, let me know if if I need to revise that. This would, for instance, a change was made for newer employees that would be age 65 or Rule of 87. In this teacher system, we've done that also for individuals up to the Rule of 90. So we were looking at extending this for other groups that had not actually been impacted by that in the past, and seeing what savings we could have from that. We took a look at early retirement factors when people leave before normal retirement, and are we using the right equivalents to make this actuarially neutral? In other words, there's essentially a penalty for every year that you retire prior to that normal retirement definition. So we took a look at that. Not a lot there, but we did include that, and we took a look at changes to the maximum benefits that you can have, whether it's 50% of your AFC, whether it's 60%, and took a look at what impacts might be calculated based on those changes. All in all, the report, and that's again on our website, and you do have a copy. We had something in the area of 30 plus scenarios that we looked at for the state system, and a similar number for the teachers system. Put all those in the appendices, and I would encourage you to take a look at those. And as we look at recommendations, we made a couple of preliminary options or proposals to put out there, but we're continuing to look at other alternatives. If you have the time, take a look at those, give us a call. We'd be happy to have some input on what might get us to those targets. And again, it's a reduction of $225 million on the state side and $379 million on the teacher's side. If you go to the next page, please. This was the direction we received from the trustee boards. The trustee boards are the fiduciaries of the fund. They are, and it has employer and employee representation, as well as myself on each of the boards. And both the state and the teachers board passed a motion directing the treasurer to work with the stakeholder groups, identify and review recommendations to lower the unfunded liability in the ADEC to at least the previous 2021 projections, and to present those to the governor and the General Assembly by the 15th of January. We did do that. We presented the report on time. But you can see in there that, again, the goal was to retire that 225 million and the 379 million. We made some general recommendations as well as some specific. My first recommendation in the report was maintain the defined benefit plans. This is not the time to try to look and say we need to restructure, that we can't afford these. In fact, a defined contribution plan, which is usually the one that folks look to, would cost you more money. And we've done separate reports on that. There's some information in the report. I did not want to spend hours and hours going through that for your reading, but we do have information on that. And if folks want to have a discussion of DC versus DB, we'd be happy to have it, because again and again and again, the data supports that defined benefit plans are better for the employee and they're better for the taxpayer. And as Steve's memo points out, and something that we analyzed in our office, 78% of state employees are also taxpayers. 78% of retirees at retirement stay in the state. They pay taxes. They buy goods and services. They're part of our economic generator for the state. They volunteer their time in their communities. And 75% of teachers upon retirement stay in this state. So they're taxpayers too, and we need to remember that as we're looking at this. But again, maintaining the DB plan. Also, my second recommendation was to no changes to the benefits for current retirees. I mentioned that a tad earlier. And, again, it's our belief that that population is already receiving a retirement benefit, and we should not reverse course on that. The third recommendation is to continue to fund the actuarially determined employer contribution, the ADEC. I was pleased that the governor included in his budget fully funding these increases, the roughly $100 million that was required. We appreciate that. My concern is going forward. Next year, it will be not a lower number, it will be a higher number. You have to add to that that $100 million as part of the mortgage, the amortization schedule that we have. And as I indicated, when you get out to 2037, 2038, it's $500 million. So we're pleased that that was done to fully fund that, but that doesn't change the unfunded liability. That just gets us to where we are now in terms of those numbers. We wanted to take a look and say, access COVID monies if they're available. And again, I'm hopeful that Congress will act and that we might see something by February. That's at least what our associations, the National Association of State Treasurers and the Auditors, Comptrollers, and Treasurers see through their representatives in DC. We also talked about creating a reserve. As I mentioned earlier, in the past, the state has had an approach that after the year is done, and you take a look at surplus, if any, you take that surplus, you fund your statutory reserves, and then the balance, 50% of it would go into a post-employment fund. In this case, as it exists in statute, the state post-employment benefit plan for healthcare. We would recommend that it be a reserve for all four buckets: the state and teachers' pensions and the state and teachers' health plans. And that we were able to move as needed with those funds. In addition to that, it might be useful in terms of having a glide path to smooth out increases in the ADEC, because that's one of the concerns that you folks have when you're looking at a budget. How are we going to pay for this? And this might be a way to kind of create a glide path in that area. We made specific recommendations to VSERs and VSTERs based on the criteria that we just talked about, whether it's contributions, changes to COLA, changes to AFC, and we'll go into those in a minute. And then we also put in recommendations to create a pre-funding mechanism for OPEB, the other post-employment benefits, which is primarily healthcare. For a very small amount of appropriation increase, very small, we would be able to get to a definition of pre-funded status with the actuaries and with the auditors. By doing that, we would lower the liabilities on our books by $1.68 billion. That's real money. And it'd certainly help us in terms of our financial statements. And as you save money and you invest those dollars, you use invested dollars to pay for benefits rather than appropriated dollars year to year. Right now, in the pension system, roughly 60% of every dollar that is, did I hear a question? No, okay. Okay, roughly 60 cents out of every dollar that's paid to a retiree through investment income. When you start pre-funding, you will do the same over time for healthcare. So you will lower the cost for the taxpayer, you will lower the cost to provide those services, and you will be providing healthcare security for our retirees. When I hear, and I've heard it many times, well, we shouldn't have healthcare for new employees. What we did past, we should honor, but we shouldn't do anything for new employees. Our state talks about healthcare being a right for every individual. We need to have a system in place that preserves that healthcare for future retirees, and to do that in a cost-effective way for all of us. So, moving on. This is the more painful piece. These are the ideas and options that we discussed and took a look at. And I do need to emphasize, there is no buy-in from any of the groups, whether it's VSEA, VTA, or the NEA. We've had discussions, we're talking to them, but we're not there. Again, I take comfort in the fact, if there can be any comfort in this, that in the NEA, Steve's memo, it says they are committed to continuing a dialogue with us and the members of the General Assembly. So I want to again thank you for that. But this is part of starting the dialogue. And we took a look at 4 options with the state system. Getting to, again, you see at the top, the target, 225 million unfunded liability reduction and an ADEC reduction of 36 million. If you would eliminate COLA for all actors upon retirement, you would absolutely meet the target of 225 million and actually exceed it. We estimate a $238 million impact from that. You would just be shy by $700,000 of the ADEC target, which seems like it's decimal. Frankly, not something that I would worry about. You're talking about 700,000 out of our 36 million. The second option we took a look at was eliminating COLA, but excluding those who are within 5 years of retirement. Now look what it does to the number, 238 million if you apply it to all actors. If you exclude those folks, it cuts it in half to 116 million. So you need to have other components or other factors into the scenario so that you can meet that target. So we took a look and said, let's add 4 years to the AFC, add 4 years to that, and they differ by group, but in group F of the system, you have 3 years to AFC, so now it would be 7. That would save $81 million. We also see that when you combine these things, the sum of the parts does not equal the whole. As they have a way of interacting with each other. So when you put in AFC and you put in COLA and the like, you're going to see reduction. So we put in an estimate of a decrease due to combining those elements, and then added that rule of 90, which would save $66 million. That gets you to $256 million, and over the amount for the ADEC. We moved on and said that is there another option similar to that we could apply. So option number 3, which is on the next page, was essentially the same option as number 2, but instead of adding 4 years to the AFC, we added 2 years. And that gets you to a preliminary savings of about $218 million. Our thought process was, well, there's something between 2 and 3 years. And that might be something that would work in either of these scenarios. We're cognizant of the fact that these options, 1, 2, and 3, do not provide retirement security for all individuals in retirement with respect to COLA. And that COLA does reduce, I need to be blunt, by not having a COLA, you reduce the purchasing power of that benefit over time. And we thought that there should be a threshold that would be in there to essentially provide retirement security, particularly for people that have lower benefits, folks that had lower incomes during the course of their career and as a result have a lower benefit in retirement. So the idea here would be to say that COLA would be applied for any money that the person receives in retirement, their benefit up to $24,000, and then any dollars in excess of that in their benefit would not have COLA. So it provides a retirement security net, so to speak. And we think that is a reasonable approach. We took a look and said, in order to get there now, you need to add, again, the AFC. So we said, let's try 2 years additional. We kept the rule of 90 in there, and we put a contribution increase in there as well of 0.35 there. Right now, they're paying 6.65, so that would get it to 7. And you see that gets you to about 220 million and a little under, just shy of the target there. And not quite there, obviously, with the $36 million. But we thought this was a reasonable approach. And for starting our discussions, and I want to be very clear that this is starting the discussions, we thought that this would be the option that we would identify as the most favorable from our perspective. And again, to start the discussion. This is not the final, this is where we begin, so to speak. Now, I have looked at Steve's memo, and I've been on several calls with their members, and I recognize that Rule of 90 is very problematic for many of the employees. I heard that message loud and clear. And if we can find other ways to do this, and we also heard, some concern about folks that are close to retirement and the impact of the COLA. We can find other ways to do this. We're all in. We are going to look at, and getting to Steve's memo as well, we are going to look at the issue of revenue and how we can put some one-time dollars into that. But again, those one-time dollars helps with this year, but the next year it's 100 and 110 and 120 and 130 million dollar increase in that ADEC. Again, getting out to $500 million combined in those last couple of years. So we need to have either a dedicated revenue source. I would love to have that conversation with you folks, or one-time dollars that would impact this, and then some configuration of a plan that would include these elements. I honestly do not find a way to get to doing something without some type of COLA in there, and we're looking at other options for that. But we will continue to look at options and to continue that dialogue with you folks and with the stakeholders. If you can go to the next page, please. This is the teacher system, and again, the target was 379 million. That target, unless there's some revenue pieces as part of the component, I do not believe is doable without some type of revenue infusion. We did for this calculation in this scenario, we eliminated COLAs for all active members, which is a very severe, and I recognize that, painful option. And that would save 165 million. Revise the AFC to 7 years, another 81 million, almost 82. And then to update the Rule of 90 for folks that aren't currently impacted by that. And a contribution increase to 8%. Right now, teachers that were hired before 7/1/14 are vested and hired before 7/1/14 are paying 5%. Teachers hired after 7/1/14 or not vested were paying 6%, and we would move in this option, move everyone to 8%. That gets you 2/3 of the way to the target. A little more on the ADEC, but 2/3 of the way on the unfunded liability target. It's extreme. We need to have discussions, but we wanted to present what we thought was the way to get as close as possible to that target. We need to do something. We cannot be in a position where we say we're not going. It's too severe. We can't do anything. We're not going to deal with $379 million increase in the unfunded liability. That's just not something that we can do. There will be impacts in terms of the sustainability of the plan. There will be impacts in the state's bond rating. There will be impact on people's choices in terms of economic development, investors who want to come to Vermont, and it will have a big increase unless we turn around our demographics in terms of the liabilities for a smaller and smaller demographic. So again, this is a starting point. It's painful for both, but we felt obliged to present these options to you. If you go to the next page, please, and I'm almost done. Subsequent to the boards giving us that direction to do the report, both the state and the teachers boards voted to produce the following motion, and it says it had received the treasurer's report, and I can't quite see all of that on the screen. Hold on, I'm gonna put you folks down here for a minute. There you go. It had received the Treasury's report and recognizes that the ADEC for fiscal year 22 and beyond may not be sustainable, and as a result recognizes that changes in benefit levels to reduce the unfunded liability may be required. I think that what we're seeing is some realization from the boards that something does need to be done. The next motion that both boards, essentially the same, was the same language, to identify and review strategies to reduce the pressure and increase the stability on the ADAC contributions, lower the unfunded liability, take a look at risk and gain sharing models, look at the options and how they impact with each group and members, and to assess to the extent possible to potential options to the retirement projections and revenue estimates on the financial condition of the system, and to produce that report by February 22nd. So we're now in part 2 in doing another report that will try to address these issues, and we'll continue to have discussions with the boards. I think it's clear to me that they're all in and trying to work together with you, with the legislature, with the administration, and with the stakeholders, the teachers and the state employees and the Vermont Troopers Association to find a solution. The VSTERS board, the teachers board, also asked us to research a range of COLA options. I think there might be one more bullet on that page if we can get there. Scroll down just a little. There we go. And the board voted to accept the treasurer's recommendation on employee contribution rates, with the caveat that a possible phase-in is needed at either 7 or 8%. And I believe, frankly, that their preference was clearly 7. So that's where we are in terms of the process with the boards as well. And if you could go to the next page, please. I just put these in for summary of some of our past work, and I will say upfront that the teachers and the state employees and the troopers have stepped up to the plate. There is no ifs and buts about it. They, in 2010, we made changes to the teacher system, including contribution increases, lengthening the age of retirement, contribution increases for the state. They're saving dollars every year. We worked real hard to get some money for this teacher system with something called the Early Retirement Reinsurance Program. It was a competitive program. We were able to get some dollars out of that. We've done work on with the municipal system on shared responsibility to increase the rates for employer and employee. If you go to the next page. This one in 2015 was probably the most instrumental in providing some stability, such as it is, because we're not there yet, but minimize some of the destructive practices that were happening with the state, the teacher system with respect to healthcare. Healthcare was not a costs were part of a payments were part of a sub-fund of the teachers' retirement system, but it was not funded. So essentially, you were putting more dollars on the credit card and having an impact on the pension liabilities and an impact on the funding requirements. We made a change to that, created its own fund, the Retired Teachers Health Medical Benefit Fund, which we refer to as RTHM, and we cobbled together some appropriation dollars from the feds, from the state, and from the locals, and we were able to implement that. That actually saved the taxpayers between now, 2014 and 2038. It's already saving money. It's projected to save $480 million, which I think is a tribute to the work that we've done before to try to find solutions, and hopefully as we move forward today and the next several months and moving forward, hopefully it's not several months, the next few months to find solutions. We made changes to the amortization schedule, that mortgage that we're paying down the unfunded liability. That saved about $165 million. And in 2016, the VSEA worked with us to also increase contribution levels to the current 6.65. To go to the next page, this is additional things that have been done that aren't necessarily related to cost, but I think in terms of the transparency and accountability of the plan. We created a pension forfeiture statute for all three systems when when employees are involved in fraud and other similar types of crimes in the course of their work. We included benchmarks for excluding some hours for to preclude spiking. And I want to say when we did that study, and we did an extensive study, we did not find rampant spiking, which is something that folks believe exists. What we saw, particularly in the state system, was that you'd see employees that had 10 years of overtime. And that tells me not that they're trying to spike. What that tells me is that there's a workforce issue because people are in the situation of having to work overtime. If you're in corrections, for instance, and you've done your shift and there's some folks that are sick on the next shift and can't be there, you can't say, we're going home anyways. You have to do that overtime. So what we've seen is that there's a long-term trend toward overtime, which brings me back to what we should be doing in terms of studying what our workforce should be and making some decisions there. That's out of our wheelhouse. That's with you, and that's with the Human Resources Department and others. But I wanted to bring that to your attention. We changed the disability statutes. Worked with you folks between 2015 and 17 to provide ability to do wage verifications and to create a system for review when we see someone who may no longer be classified as disabled, or we see that someone is working in the private sector on top of their retirement. I would point out that we do not see rampant abuse. We are a state that has respect in the system. The employees respect it, the retirees respect it, and I'm very pleased as we've done the analysis that we've found very, very, very little that would give us pause. And it tells me a great deal about the integrity of our employees and our retirees. And I believe, do we have one more page? Is that it? That's it. Okay. So in closing, I would say that, again, these are painful. We're trying to work through solutions with you, with the stakeholders. We need to do them now. 2 years ago, or 19, excuse me, when we started the process to try to eliminate or reduce the 815 and the $1.5 billion unfunded liability, we did a couple of things that in retrospect we would have done differently, and we are doing differently this time around. One is the groups were too large. We had all three retirement plans in the same room, along with you folks. In fact, Madam Chair, you were one of the invitees to the meetings. We had the administration, all the groups together. We had all the associations, employee associations, and it became too unwieldy with the size of it. And we thought that we needed to break it into smaller, more discrete groups. And secondly, we got started a little later than we should have. So we were into March when we were still trying to work on recommendations. And frankly, COVID hit at that point in time. So the January 15th deadline to get that to you was very important to us because it gave us the room to work with you to find a solution. And I would strongly recommend, I cannot say this more clearly, you cannot say we're going to do a study and move into the next year. We need to do this now. We need to make a change so that we can not compound this with delay. And so we have the resources to work with you. We have an appendices in the report that show you various scenarios. We'd be happy to work with you folks. We'd be happy to work with Joint Fiscal. We'd be happy if you hired an independent consultant to assist in some of this. We are clear that we need to do this now. The consequences, the delay are too great in terms of creating lack of retirement security for all of our members. And for me, the ultimate goal is to make sure that everyone has a defined benefit plan, has retirement security, and that we have a system that is sustainable, not just for this generation, but future generations. We want to make sure that that system is there for all the individuals that will join between now and 2038 and beyond. We want to make sure that the state has a highly trained workforce there's a lot of work we need to do there. And again, a lot of pieces to that. You folks are taking up the issue of security and safety for our employees, and I applaud you for doing that. But here, our role is in terms of retirement security, and we want to make sure it's now and in the future for all generations of employees. And I want to say thank you again for the time. I look forward to working with you. I look forward to working with the employee groups, the administration, and finding a solution this year. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to have committee questions now. Senator Colmer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Beth, I just want to point out, I did get an email while you were talking about the age of retirement. If someone has 35 years of state employment, but they're only 53 years old, are they not eligible to collect full retirement?
I'm going to let Erica answer that question because she's the expert on benefits and the nuances there.
I'm sure. So for the record, this is Erica Wolfing, Director of Retirement. Yeah, if we do have a state employee with 35 years of service, regardless of their age, they can retire on normal retirement. They're in what we call our old group F, and it's 30 years, any age is the normal retirement rule.
Okay.
But if we went to rule of 90, there would be an impact on that normal retirement.
I thought that it would still be 30 was normal retirement, but if you had less than 30, then you had to do the rule of 90 or the rule of 87, whichever it is.
Erica?
Correct. So I'm sorry, and Senator Colmer, what was the age of this person?
53.
And 35
And they had
years?
35 years.
That's what he says.
So that would give them 88, their combination of age and years of service. So if we went to a rule of 90, they'd have to work another year because you earn a year from your service and you earn a year from your age, if that makes sense.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Oh, okay. I thought, okay, never mind. Any more questions from the committee? This is a lot of information.
Yes, it is.
Senator Clarkson.
Thank you, Beth. It's hard news and our, it's a tough and thorny problem. And I think a lot of us in 2007 and 10 that thought we'd solved this. So it's really frustrating to see it exacerbated. It's really discouraging. Did you say that did I hear at the beginning, and have I heard over the course of all these conversations, that the return is only 7.5%? It was 7.5% on this huge pension investment?
Okay. So yes, so the rate of return is an assumption that that's over a long period of time, so over the 30-year period, and it's an assumption that the actuaries develop, and it was at 7.5 way back when I was a deputy. It was 8.25. Then it became 8, then 7.95, then 7.5, and now 7, which was part of the experience study in a
right.
Actual returns do not necessarily get to those levels, but we have seen some ups and downs there. If I take a look right now at VPIC, the 1-year return as of September 30th, the 1-year return was 8.6%. The 3-year return was 6.6%. The 5-year was 8.1%, and the 10-year, which was only 6.8%. So you see some below the 7, some above the 7. And if you take a look at those numbers, they vary from year to year. Back in December of 19, if you annualized our numbers as of 12/31/19, we made 19.1%, excuse me, 17.2%, but we were only in the 80th percentile, meaning that we were in the low end, but despite making 17%. Today, when you take a look at that 1-year number at 8.6, we're in the top 16%. So it will vary. It's endpoint sensitive. It's also the types of assets you have. Folks that have higher amounts of equities do well in boom environments. Not so well, for instance, in March when the market tanked. So you want to have a balance in this, but the rate of return assumption is 7%.
And how does that compare to other huge pension funds, you know, TIAA, CREF and Vanguard? And I mean, have you, obviously you're looking at all those because this just seems low at the moment.
Well,
I mean, I know it's done over time, but I'm in the process of looking at an endowment for something here in our neck of the woods, and it's their rate of return over a period of time is well over 8%, 8.5.
Yeah. Well, I think that one of the issues you have is that we're making significant payments out of those for retirement. So when you have to, those assets come in, both the state and the teacher system require us to take assets during the course of the year and essentially pay out dollars. And so we're reducing those assets and paying out dollars to folks. Now we're making more money in total, and that's a good thing. But our cash flow negative in those two systems, cash flow positive in the municipal system. So that has an impact. Also, you know, again, if you're looking to try to shoot the stars and have 75%, of your money in equity, that's a great thing when the market's going well. 2008, not so much. This past March, not so much. Downturn. So we have assets that have some downside protection, as well as assets that have growth profiles in it. And it'll vary, but we're right in sync. As I said, right now we're doing very well. We had a period of time, frankly, where that boom environment, we missed a lot of that. And that's why the 10-year number isn't where it should be. But I think we're right on target right now in terms of our mix. And I would give a shout out to Tom Galanka, who's the chair of the VPIC. I'm one member of a committee of 7 that does the voting on this. They hire a chair. So there are actually 6 members who then hire a chair, Tom. And so a 7-member board plus alternates for the employee and the governor appointees. And I think that where we are now, we're more transparent. We have a much more simple profile rather than some really complex, expensive investments. And we've been able to reduce the fees considerably at the same time. So lowering the cost, I believe something in the area of $6 million a year in reduced fees by doing that. So I would say that the direction we've had, particularly in the last 4 years, is something that I'm comfortable with. Obviously, the inferences I wasn't as comfortable in the past, but I think that we're definitely on the right direction with this, and we're going to continue to look at it. And again, I've when I see a 5-year number at 8.1%, I'm pleased with that. But I see a 3-year number at 6.6. They're endpoint sensitive, depending on when you do the numbers. If you take a look at the 3-year number in December 31st, it's 8.9. Now I took a look at other systems and see how we compared to them. And 2 things: one, with respect to the assumed rate of return, and we're at 7%, we're right around the middle of plans. It's hard to do that because they have different asset allocations, but our neighbors are south of 7. You see across the country a number of systems that are at that 6.75 range. Frankly, the trend is downward, not upward in the rates of return.
Thanks.
Yep.
Committee, any other questions right now? And I think that we won't have time today to hear from VSEA and NEA and in the VTA. And I apologize for that, but I think that if we started, it would be giving short shrift to everybody. And we really want to be able to devote some time to this and to really get into it. So, and I know you had to drive hours to get to Montpelier in order to testify. And now you're being asked not to, so I do apologize for that, but we will invite you again. Senator Ram?
Just another rookie question, but I just want to make sure I understand as I dig into all of this, what our jurisdiction or outcome in the committee will be as government operator.
Well, we deal with retirement issues. That is in our jurisdiction.
So do we make
And
a recommendation to?
Yes, we may come and we don't deal with teachers as a normal rule, but we do deal with retirement.
Okay.
And we do deal with the state employees.
So state troopers is our direct jurisdiction to then pass to appropriations.
The what?
Troopers and employees are
and NEA
and teachers. Okay.
Because we deal with retirement is one of the areas of concern that's assigned to GovOps. And so we will make recommendations to appropriations. They obviously make the final, they might defer to us around specifics, but in terms of the final amount of money that is put into any, into the ADEC or anything is their decision.
Okay, and Treasurer Pierce, just to clarify from your perspective and from what I think I saw in the presentation, it would not be in your purview necessarily to make any revenue recommendations as an option. Your job is really just to balance the recommendations around what happens if there's no new revenue to the system besides the allotment in the recommendation from the governor.
I think that's pretty close. What we're making recommendations. I would say that we are a strong advocate of applying additional revenues to this. I'm not a tax expert. I'm not your economist. So we're not there to suggest a particular model to get there. But I also want to stress that it cannot be one-time funds that will solve this. It has to be a sustained dollar and source of revenue going forward. Although putting a big chunk of money into a reserve would be a good idea. And again, I want to stand first in line to when those COVID dollars are available to make that pitch.
Okay.
So I hope that answers your question.
It doesn't, and Madam Chair, I could take this offline, but I am still trying to understand if we had a big chunk of money, the value of putting it into the reserve versus what I'm envisioning as applying it to the principal. That's kind of what I'm, why would.
Well, we can have that conversation.
Senator,
I think there are a lot of questions that we need to get into more. And one of the things that I would like to, and I know that this is controversial and that I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but the voices for changing to a defined contribution system are swelling up. And this is and this crisis that we're in, I think, is feeding that. And I think we just need to hear some of those studies and some of those things that show us that it doesn't save money. And I was on the committee that looked at that a couple of years ago. And so we'll take that up also when we do this.
Yeah, Senator, I absolutely would love to have that conversation because I think it's short-sighted with the DC plan, but I recognize that the current state we're in is, as you said, swelling the numbers in terms of advocacy for a DC plan. If I could, with partly answer, if you wouldn't mind, Keisha's question.
If it's very short, because I know that people have to be in different places at 5 o'clock, and
Got it.
so
yeah, so
they need a break.
Yeah, so Representative Ram, I would say that it's both. you would want to put money in to lower and to get to the principal, absolutely. But I would also recommend that some type of reserve process going forward, because you don't know what the surplus is going to be next year or the year after that. And that's where you can put some of the money into a reserve, that model that we talked about. I saw Connecticut actually for the first time did a similar model on that. So it's worth looking at. But paying down the principal is a really good idea too, Representative. And if bear with me one more moment, I just want to say thank you to Amy, because Steve, myself, Jeff, we do this for our professional work. Amy has another job, and she's spending an awful lot of time with me and with Steve and Mike O'Neill and folks having these conversations. And I know it's taken a toll on her work, and I just want to say thank you, because no offense, Steve, you, Jeff, and I, we get paid to do this. She gets paid to do other things, and I just want to say thank you, Amy.
Thank you. So committee, with that, I would say, because this is such a, is affecting so many people, we're going to take this up sooner rather than later so that we can have some answers for people and hear from people. So I think we'll try to do it next week. And I don't remember what I have scheduled for next week now, but we will try and get this in next week, and I'll let everybody know.
We have elections and this so far.
Well, no, we have other other things.
I'm just joking.
So committee, I'm in the committee room right now, and I found Senator Collmore. I found your Title 17.
Oh boy.
Do you want other folders sent to you? Huh? No. Okay. Senator Rahm, I found a brand new blank one for you. Okay. Senator Clarkson, I found yours. Do you want any other? Do you want any other folders?
I don't recall if I left I have my law enforcement folders here.
Are you sure you don't have mine? Mine are all missing.
No, my handwriting is distinctive.
I can't find mine anywhere.
I will double check, but I'm pretty sure I have mine. But I'll double check. But the EMS ones, you asked us to see if we could find where our EMS ones were.
Most of them are probably in your 124 law enforcement.
Yes, I think I have all of that from 124. So I think I'm okay. I just need the green book.
And thanks. Senator Polina, you have your Title 17? And do you want other folders? Okay, and I'm asking Mike to also put any supplement to Title 17 in for you. So you should be getting a little package I had to move over here because my iPad was running out of time. So I had to move over here and plug it in. So thank you committee. And I hate to leave this building.
You don't need to leave it too soon. Aren't you? Are you staying all week?
Oh, I'm not coming back. Well, tomorrow is Friday, right?
Right.
And so, no, I just came here today to get stuff. I'm not going to come all the days. I have to actually put on pants when I come here.
And real shoes.
And real shoes, yeah. So.
Madam Chair, I have to go prepare for a public hearing if I could.
I know you do. I won't be there until 6. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, I will plug in right at 6.
Okay.